Chapter 721-Island Whales. Upside Down Mountain. Hancock muttered something in a low voice, his beautiful eyes flashing brightly, staring straight ahead. Naturally, she also knew the existence of Upside Down Mountain. This mountain can be described as the only route to the Great Waterway. Exit from the Great Passage, and leave here. Unless, of course, someone can get rid of the windlass belt tilde. For example, the technology controlled by the naval headquarters can directly use warships to traverse the windlass belt to reach the remaining 4 sea areas. But this is only limited to naval warships, and ordinary pirates cannot always have this ability. Moreover, there are a large number of sea kings in the windlass belt, which is completely different from the Great Channel. The sea area of the Great Waterway is vast and boundless, and the frequency of sea kings is very high. But if you are lucky, it is normal to not encounter sea kings for 10 days and a half months. And in the windlass zone, if you don't encounter a sea king in 1 day, it's the kind of unfortunate luck. It can be seen how huge the number of sea kings in the windlass belt is. Once there, they are all in groups. In this way, if you want to cross the windlass belt, you also need to have enough self-confidence. Otherwise, if you cross the windlass belt, there is only one dead end. Even if the Navy headquarters controls the method of crossing the windlass belt, it would not dare to say that all the navies can cross the windlass belt without being attacked by the sea kings. This is just a probability, and there is no guarantee that every warship will be successful. Unexpectedly, we actually arrived at Upside Down Mountain. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly. He could not forget the famous location of Upside Down Mountain, the entrance to the Great Channel. Looking at the red soil continent that was getting closer and closer, he even had a terrible idea in his heart. If it is said that the passage of the Red Earth continent is destroyed here, does it mean that the way for the 4 seas to enter the Great Waterway has been completely blocked? If I try it, I will be the target of everyone's crusade. Although I am not afraid, there is no need to choose to die for some irrelevant things. Li Ang's face was calm, and he whispered to himself. What are you talking about? Hancock looked at Li Ang with beautiful eyes, often his eyelashes trembled, and asked in a low voice. It's nothing, go and wake up Tautu and the others, we're going to log in and go ashore. Li Ang shook his head and said bluntly. Good. Hancock nodded immediately, shaking his jet-black hair, a delicate and charming face, with a sweet smile. Seeing that she will be able to log in and go ashore again, she is naturally looking forward to it. After all, wandering without a destination, the moment when the destination is reached, the mood of the people on the boat naturally does not need to be described too much. Soon, Hancock, Tautu, and Tina walked out of the room. Their hair was messy, and it was difficult to hide their amazing faces. Even if they were not trim, they were quite beautiful. Where's Vivi? Li Ang glanced at it and asked involuntarily. Wei Wei is taking a shower, and her movements are a bit difficult, so it will take a while. Hancock rolled his eyes and said angrily. Wasn't this happening because of Li Ang in front of him? Otherwise, why would Wei Wei have such a hard time getting up to wash up? It seems that I have to increase the difficulty and train her physique. Li Ang looked at the 3 girls and said with a smile. He didn't want this to happen in the future. Upside Down Mountain. Tautu and Tina looked ahead and whispered. They didn't come here once or twice, and they still knew a lot about Upside Down Mountain. You know what? Li Ang asked with a smile, not feeling surprised. Tautu and Tina knew that it must be when they often perform tasks, they will pass by Upside Down Mountain. Even, it is not impossible to enter the other 4 seas from Upside Down Mountain. Chapter 721-Island Whales. Tautu and Tina knew that it must be when they often perform tasks, they will pass by Upside Down Mountain. Even, it is not impossible to enter the other 4 seas from Upside Down Mountain. Even though the Navy has mastered the technology of crossing the windlass belt, in many cases, if it is not a particularly emergency situation, to ensure safety and smoothness, most of them will go to Upside Down Mountain. Of course, we still occasionally enter the East China Sea and other places. Tina's pink lips parted slightly and nodded. It can be seen that they are indeed no strangers to this place. Whoa! Suddenly, there was a wave of waves on the sea, rolling continuously. The sea water swayed, just like the water carried in a bowl, constantly overflowing and throwing up. Well. Li Ang's eyes narrowed slightly, with a smile on his face, without the slightest sense of tension. What's the matter? Taotu and Tina raised their brows, but they rarely encountered such a situation. Is it a sea king? Don't be nervous. Li Ang relieved the tension of the three girls a little and said with a smile, however, it's just a giant whale, and it's not lethal. Only he dared to say this. A giant whale is not lethal. This is a terrifying giant creature that can knock down a warship, but in Li Ang's eyes, it is just a docile little animal with no lethality. A giant whale. The tension in Hancock's heart disappeared immediately, with a little curiosity. If it was just a giant whale, they wouldn't have the slightest fear. Hancock can kill a lot of giant whales alone, and Taotu and Tina need not say much. In other words, Wei Wei couldn't kill a whale alone. The rest of the people present have the ability to kill a whale alone. Whoa! The sea splashed and fell on the deck. In Li Ang's sight, there was a giant whale with scars all over its head, and there was also a pattern of a pirate, which was twisted and twisted, which was very strange. However, you must know that Li Ang and others are not completely close yet. The distance is more than 1,000 meters away. I saw such an obvious whale. If it got close, how huge would this whale be? This whale looks like an island whale. It should be the largest island whale in the world, right? Hancock said suspiciously. So far apart, you can see such a huge body. It can be seen that the size of this whale is very unusual. Probably, the size of a few kilometers. It's like the size of an island. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly and explained in a low voice. Are you nervous facing such a terrifying giant creature? Ordinary people are naturally nervous. But for Li Ang and others, they are just ordinary creatures with a slightly larger size. Moreover, this whale is not as ferocious as the sea kings. Speaking of which, its nature is rather docile. It is completely different from the kind of sea kings who immediately kill the enemy when they see it. A few kilometers in size. That's really rare. Taotu and Tina also showed a bit of amazement and said. Even for them, it would be difficult to see such a huge whale. But today, they finally saw it. This is probably the largest whale in the world. Can the sea kings be compared? The average sea king is only a dozen meters, and the larger ones are dozens of meters. In front of this whale, it is a sun. If a war is really going to start, this whale will slam into it all at once, and the sea kings that are dozens of meters are afraid that even the bile will be knocked out. NLT, 39 and GT. Chapter 722-Hidden Heaven and Earth. Although his personality is gentle, it does not mean that he will be slaughtered by others. If the Sea Kings don't attack, it's fine. If you attack it, it will divide the Sea Kings by 3 and 5, and you can directly smash the Sea Kings into pieces. This pirate group. Tina's pink lips parted slightly, and when she looked from a distance, she saw the twisted pirate flag on the whale's head. The Straw Hat Pirates. Li Ang said with a calm face and a slight smile. Although the painting is ugly, it still has a certain degree of recognition. Of course. That's because he came to a conclusion based on the premise he already knew. If it were Momotu and the others, it was completely impossible to tell which pirate group this was. The Straw Hat Pirates. Taotu and Tina were also surprised. Speaking of the Draft Hat Gang, Li Ang still has some nostalgic memories. It's been a long time, I haven't heard any news from these guys. However, it seems that some time ago, it seems that the Straw Hat Boy has returned to Marin Vatican again. Some time ago, news came out of Marin Vando. It was also during the time when we left Marin Vando and sailed at sea. Straw Hat Boy Luffy returned to Marin Vando again. Taotu's face changed, and he whispered. These things are no secret to her. Moreover, this is also public information on the sea. However, recently, because Li Ang's reputation was too loud, he directly suppressed all the news of the Straw Hat Boy. I know. Li Ang nodded, he already knew these things. He doesn't need anyone else to report it, he will know. Immediately. He looked at the huge whale in front of him, and the corners of his mouth moved slightly. If you guessed correctly, this whale is called Rabu. Known as the largest island whale in the world. Look. Tina's beautiful eyes flashed and she hurriedly said. I see. Li Ang nodded, unmoved. Don't do something. Tautu looked at Li Ang with a puzzled face and asked. If it goes on like this, I am afraid that they will be swallowed by this whale. That's right. The huge whale opened its huge fangs in the direction of Li Ang, and a dark scene appeared in the sight of Li Ang and others. For this kind of situation, Tautu, Tina, Hancock and others all felt indescribably nervous. Even if their strength is very strong, but they dare not say that they will be swallowed by the other party. Don't worry, maybe we can harvest some other novel things. Could it be that if you are swallowed by a whale, you will die? Li Ang smiled lightly and said, let me show you a whole new world. You mean, there is something special in this whale's belly? Hancock asked with a little curiosity. It can be understood in the same way. Inside the whale, there is a hidden world. How can we miss this kind of thing? Presumably, this is the first time you have heard of it. Li Ang said with a smile. There won't be an accident, will it? Tautu and Tina asked while feeling a little nervous. For things like entering the belly of giant creatures, no matter how strong they are, they will unconsciously have uneasy mood swings. Chapter 722-Hidden Heaven and Earth. For things like entering the belly of giant creatures, no matter how strong they are, they will unconsciously have uneasy mood swings. No one can say for sure what's going on inside. Its lethality is very small. If it is not hit by its head, it can basically sit back and relax. As for its stomach, I guess there should be no accident. What's more, am I not here? Even if there is an accident, I will take you away. When the time comes, just kill it. Li Ang's face was calm and he said directly. Although it was a pity, he didn't have any regrets about killing the whale. Whales are big, and they also know how to communicate with people and have a little bit of intelligence. However, it wasn't Li Ang who personally cultivated it. If he died, he would not have any psychological burden. Of course, he wouldn't do it unless he had to. But when it came to this time, he would not be soft at all, and directly killed Rabu the whale. Whoa! The sea rolled, and the whale Rab opened its mouth wide and swallowed it for a while. The current also showed a strange trend, and the entire warship was madly swallowed into the mouth of Rabu the whale. Even the wind won't save the warship's weird sailing. It's like there is a whirlpool surrounding the warship, and the trajectory of the sailing can't be changed. However, if it is an undersea vortex, Li Ang can use his terrifying power to forcibly interrupt the vortex, which directly eliminates the danger. This is very different from the vortex produced by the natural environment. It is not impossible for Li Ang to stop the direction of the ocean current caused by the engulfing of giant creatures. But he didn't want to do it at this time. At the very least, he had to wait until he entered the belly of the whale to see different scenery. He was very curious, is there really a small world in the stomach of a whale? Approaching. Hancock's face changed and he said in a low voice. Seeing that, the huge fangs were getting closer and closer, and the tension of several of them became more intense, which could not be concealed on their delicate faces. Suddenly, a burst of darkness descended. Can't see 5 fingers. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled faintly. We have successfully entered the belly of the whale. I don't know if it is really hungry, and it really swallowed us. There is light ahead. Tautu looked ahead and reminded. The direction the warship is sailing is also in this direction. So, we don't have to worry too much. Li Ang waved his hand, looking calm. It's just in the stomach of a whale, what's there to be nervous about? He didn't understand the mood of Hancock and others at all. If you can't get out, why don't you just break it open? What a simple and easy thing, as to think so complicated. Anyway, Liang looked at the surrounding environment without panic. Because of the light, everything here is gradually showing its appearance at 0.8. As Liang said before, this place is indeed a small world. In the belly of the whale, there are heaven and earth, and some small buildings made by humans. It really is, living in the belly of a whale. The corners of Liang's mouth twitched slightly, and he smiled. I didn't expect that there is such a big place hidden in the belly of the whale. It looks like an island. Yeah, but by the way, how do we get out in a while? Break open. But this kind of whale is very rare. It would be a pity to kill it. Quote. The three Hancock girls communicated, looking at Liang, waiting for the other party's answer. I'll think about these things later. Don't we want to watch it here now? Why are we leaving here in such a hurry? Liang was not nervous and said lightly. Chapter 723 _ The World in the Stomach. That's right. Hancock calmed down a little and nodded. Anyway, she wasn't so timid, and after Liang's remarks, she didn't have much objection. Immediately, with those curious eyes, he looked at the surrounding scenes. Sure enough, there is heaven and earth inside. If the light is not a little weak, it can be regarded as an island and exist here. Tina said slowly with curiosity on her face. Are there walls here? But, in other words, are walls really walls? I'm afraid not, the inner wall of the whale's stomach, right? But at a glance, it is also impossible to see the end. Is the area in the stomach so huge? The corners of Liang's mouth moved slightly, and his smile became even brighter. This is also the first time he has entered the belly of a creature. What he didn't expect is that the environment in this belly is just like the outside, and there is not much difference. It is no wonder that the whale rab is known as the largest island whale in the world. The area in the stomach, 26, is naturally not difficult to infer. Soon, Wei Wei also came out of the room, looking around with a bewildered face, and asked in a low voice, have we arrived at the island? Why is it so unfamiliar here? Guess where we are? Liang asked jokingly. Hearing that, Hancock, Taotu, and Tina also all agreed, looking at Wei Wei with strange eyes, looking forward to the other party's answer. Have we left the Great Waterway? Wei Wei's beautiful eyes flashed and she lost her voice. What are you thinking in your little brain? Liang couldn't help but knocked on Wei Wei's forehead and said, is it such a simple thing to leave the Great Waterway? Moreover, we are sailing by letting the sea breeze blow freely. Instead of controlling it independently, do you understand? So, where is this place? Wei Wei wasn't angry either, she tilted her head and asked suspiciously. It depends on your own perception. Liang smiled and said nothing. Afterwards, Wei Wei looked at Hancock, Taotu, and Tina beside her. The latter three also shook their heads with smiles, looking forward to Wei Wei's words. In this way, Wei Wei can only guess by herself. However, if Liang, Hancock and others didn't tell her, even if she broke her head, she couldn't come up with the result. Who would have thought, where is this place? Without going through that process, even Hancock and others could not imagine the real answer. Only Liang, after using the domineering arrogance, might try to figure it out. You can sense the life characteristics here with a domineering look. Therefore, it is not very difficult to deduce what is in the belly of the creature. Can Wei Wei deduce it? Naturally impossible. The poor princess didn't even know that she was already in the belly of another creature. Unexpectedly, there are no obvious buildings here, how can you guess? With a bitter face, Wei Wei shook her sky-blue hair and said, the light here seems a little strange. It always feels strange, but I can't think of anything strange. Okay, stop teasing Wei Wei and tell her the answer. Hancock laughed when he saw Wei Wei's helpless expression. Then tell me, anyway, everyone is here for the first time. Li Ang nodded, his smile disappeared, and he looked at Wei Wei. Where is this place? Wei Wei asked. Hancock replied, here is the belly of a huge whale. So, no matter how much you guess, you can't think of the answer. No one would have thought that there are so many things hidden in the belly of a whale. Quote. Chapter 723 _ The World in the Stomach. NLT, 42 and GT. Hancock replied, here is the belly of a huge whale. So, no matter how much you guess, you can't think of the answer. No one would have thought that there are so many things hidden in the belly of a whale. Quote. What? Wei Wei's beautiful eyes widened, round and round. She never thought, actually, she is now in the belly of a creature. Thinking of this, her pretty face turned pale. Shouldn't it be swallowed by this giant creature? So, can you still go out? Wei Wei looked at Li Ang with hope, and asked, how do we get out? Simple, if you don't go out from the direction you came in, just split it up. Or, if it hurts, it will naturally spit us out. Li Ang's face was calm, he waved his hand and said. That's it, but I still feel it's weird. Wei Wei whispered to herself and said a few words. Really? Into the belly of a creature. This kind of thing, in the past, she couldn't believe it. But since Hancock had said so, she certainly wouldn't doubt it. The sea is still too big, and anything can happen. Therefore, Wei Wei can be considered acceptable, and will not face the kind of mental breakdown. In the stomach of a creature. Accompanied by Li Ang and so many people, could she still be afraid? Although it is inevitable that there will be some tension, at the very least, there is still a calm state of mind. Is this really the belly of a creature? Wei Wei turned her nervousness into curiosity, looking around like a curious baby. It was the first time she saw such a scene, and it was actually in the stomach of a creature, but he was surprised. Could it still lie to you? Li Ang rubbed Wei Wei's sky-blue hair fiercely and said. Wei Wei didn't care either. Although her hair was messy, she was curious and looked around, unable to calm her throbbing for a long time. Go on, I think, here, it should be more than that simple. Li Ang looked at the area ahead and said. Here, there's a lot to think about making the 273. Is it what the whale swallowed and left behind? Or, other reasons? This point, he also has a corresponding answer in his heart. If nothing else, the world in the whale's stomach is thought to be made. Otherwise, there would not be so many buildings and land in the whale's interior. That's right. It is land. In the belly of a whale, there is still land. Can giant creatures easily change the environment in their stomachs? In this way, they won't die. Li Ang was puzzled. This is his biggest doubt. After so many transformations in his stomach, if he still doesn't die, then this whale is not easy. Of course, it is understandable. Maybe the person who made these things will be very cautious and try to avoid some key places that cause whales. But it is not easy to create a world in the belly of a whale. At least, Li Ang admits that if he wants to do it, it will be even more difficult. Unless, directly cut off a land outside and move the land into the belly of the whale. If he was allowed to build little by little, he would not have the patience. And books? Wei Wei said to herself, looking at some quaint books floating out beside her. There are too many things here, too complicated, and I don't know if people put them here on purpose, or if they were left behind by a pirate group that was swallowed by a whale. NLT, 43 and GT. Chapter 724 Coloca's. How did this place come to be? Wei Wei couldn't help but ask. Made by humans. Li Ang didn't need to think and gave the answer directly. Human. Wei Wei whispered to herself, do humans make so many things in the belly of a whale? And, who is this person? This is unknown. However, this person, if there is no accident, we will meet him next. So, if you have any doubts, just ask directly. Li Ang said with a smile. Will we meet this man? Is he here? Tina was also puzzled. Why did she ask more and more, and her head was full of confusion. He is active in this area. I think you have not noticed it in the past. Li Ang looked at Tautu and Tina and smiled. The two occasionally crossed the upside-down mountain, but never found anyone here. Hearing the words, Tina said embarrassingly, "Isn't this, it happened a long time ago. Now we generally take the method of crossing the windless belt, and directly omit the troublesome thing of rushing to upside-down mountain." No wonder. Li Ang was stunned and didn't say anything more. The entire warship is sailing in the belly of the whale, and there are a lot of land, walls, and debris in the places you see. Hancock, Tautu, and Tina observed the surrounding scene. This kind of scene is rare. In particular, in the belly of a whale, isn't that a very rare thing? At least, even Wei Wei is constantly observing here, and in the stomach of a huge creature, she must be carefully observed. Possibly, some interesting things may also be found. It's like an island, Wei Wei said with a touch of emotion. Suddenly, the entire sea swayed, and the warship moved with it, causing a tremor. What is it doing outside? Li Ang couldn't help thinking, but he didn't care too much. Now that it's in the belly of the creature, be prepared to meet the tremor at any time. This whale is not a quiet guy, and it is understandable to bump into each other from time to time. Hancock and others did not act too surprised, and continued to observe the environment ahead. If this tremor occurred in the sea, it would be a major event that shocked the world. But here, in the belly of the creature, it's normal for these things to happen. In the sea, such a terrifying tremor occurred. No doubt, it was a problem at the bottom of the sea. It seems that there is a person in front of you. Wei Wei rubbed her eyes and said uncertainly. Suddenly, Hancock, Tautu, and Tina were all attracted and looked forward. Really? They all saw a person. This person seemed to be lying on the land next to him, holding a newspaper and watching it very comfortably. This man is so strange. Wei Wei's pink lips parted slightly, and she whispered. Not to mention her, even the three of Hancock were a little surprised. In the belly of the creature, reading the newspaper so leisurely. This guy is not a simple character. If you guess wrong, everything here should have a lot to do with this person. Are we going to get close? Hancock looked at Li Ang, pondering the other party's opinion. Whatever, it doesn't matter anyway. I just said, there is someone here. Moreover, it is this person who makes the creature's stomach look like this. Chapter 724-Kurokas. NLT, 44 and GT. Whatever, it doesn't matter anyway. I just said, there is someone here. Moreover, it is this person who makes the creature's stomach look like this. Li Ang acted very relaxed and comfortable, without the slightest bit of surprise. Someone here, he already knew. Moreover, this person, if nothing else, should be the one who was pulled to the ship of One Piece to treat Roger when Roger was terminally ill. And here, choose to rest and recuperate. Spend your old age with a whale. Of course. Said to be the crew of One Piece, not all of them. It can only be said that it is half a crew member. After Roger died and the pirate group disbanded, he came here and lived with a whale for more than 10 years. Let's approach the past and say hello. When you come to someone else's site, you still need to say hello. Although, he is not a big man. But, in my eyes, no one is a big man. Is it? Li Ang laughed and said. Soon. The entire warship gradually approached the land ahead. The old man on the land also noticed the appearance of the warship and did not take it seriously. In his view, this is obviously a warship that was accidentally eaten by the whale Rabu. If you want to go out, it is not impossible, but it will not be so easy. Whoa! The sea splashed, and the entire warship pulled away from the sea on both sides. The waves rolled up, and waves of waves spread around. At close range, Li Ang stood on the deck and saw the face of the old man, wearing a pink top, light blue shorts, and a bald head with something similar to a coxcomb. He was wearing a pair of glasses, holding the newspaper in both hands, and was paying attention to the S of the newspaper, but he didn't pay any attention to Liang and others. Diaresis, it's an old gentleman. Wei Wei's voice was soft and she said slowly. The background is not small. I said that he was a doctor on the ship of Roger, the Pirate King. Would you believe it? The corner of Liang's mouth raised an arc, and he smiled. The doctor on the one-piece ship. Not to mention, Hancock, Tautu and others were really shocked. How could such a person hide here? However, they were soon relieved. One Piece's pirate group was disbanded, and all members except Rayleigh rarely showed up. Is there any other explanation besides seclusion? Are they killed? This is not very likely. The most likely possibility is that they are secluded and no longer appear in the sight of everyone. Only, remarkably, never thought that the doctor on the ship of One Piece would be on Upside Down Mountain. However, it is said that it is the doctor on the One Piece ship. But in fact, he was only a monk halfway, and he was pulled into the One Piece ship halfway. Looking at the surprised expressions of the girls, Liang continued to explain. You bastard, how did you know that? Hancock looked at Liang suspiciously and asked. Let you know more about the world, you don't know, it's better now. Liang rubbed Hancock's forehead and smiled. Hancock blushed slightly, feeling a little ashamed, and did not push Liang away to disturb his hair. Is it really the reason why I didn't learn these? Not to mention her, even Tautu, Tina, and even Wei Wei, who loves to study, were all hot, unable to refute Liang's remarks. They don't even know these things, are they really not studying hard? NLT, 45 and GT. Chapter 725-Panic. After Liang's remarks, the four Hancock said were ashamed, and their pretty faces flushed. Do you really have enough knowledge? But how do you know these things? They are almost a little suspicious of life. At this time, Liang Kai smiled and said, do you really believe it? The things I said are all secrets. You don't know, it's normal. You bastard. Hancock's beautiful eyes were round and full of anger. She bit her red lips lightly, and was about to show her teeth and claws at Liang. Okay, let's go and greet him. He's an old man, so it's not easy to hear. After so many years, he's been here alone. Liang waved his hand and said bluntly. Hancock calmed down a little, but his face was still a little annoyed, and he gave Liang a vicious look. His expression was very bad. It's all right. Wei Wei was slightly relieved. What? It turns out that these news are not accessible to others. Almost, people thought it was a lack of knowledge. This big bad guy is really bad. She looked at Liang's back with beautiful eyes, and her expression was a little dissatisfied. This time, Liang almost directly made the four daughters a little hostile to him. I'll go down and have a chat with him, you can do as you please. You can also observe the surrounding environment. After all, the world in your stomach is not so easy to see. Liang jumped up and disappeared from the sight of Hancock and others. The rest of Hancock and others stared at each other, not knowing what to do next. Are we following him? Wei Wei asked weakly. Farewell, since we have all come to this magical place. Naturally, we have to walk around a bit. After we leave, we will never see such a picture again. Hancock shook his head and said bluntly. That's right. The other three nodded. The four women made up their minds and gradually logged in and went ashore. However, they didn't go to Liang's position, but walked around in this environment recklessly, observing, and taking in the scene in the creature's stomach. What they still marveled at was the belly of a creature, which was all too real. Basically the same as the outside environment. If you are not careful, you will not notice any abnormality at all. Even if you observe carefully, if the creatures outside remain calm, the people here will still not find out where they are. At the same time, Liang had already stood in front of CGFE, the old man with a smile on his face and said, Kurokas. Well. At this moment, Kurokas raised his brows and looked away from the newspaper. His name has not been known for a long time. Where did you hear about this guy? There are only a handful of people who know his upside-down mountain. Moreover, those old friends have their own seclusion places, and will no longer condense into a group. Naturally, I only come to play with him occasionally, not too often. But he didn't think he knew such a young old friend. Seeing that, Li Ang's age seems to be in his early 20s, right? I am in my 70s and 80s, where can I have friends in their 20s? This made Kuroka's very depressed and asked, Lady, how do you know my name? I've seen Rayleigh. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly. It is true that he has seen Rayleigh, but Rayleigh has never mentioned the person Kuroka's. Of course. Li Ang said that he had seen Riley, but it did not mean that he said that Riley told him. However, if Kuroka's wanted to fall into a misunderstanding, he would be no wonder. Rayleigh. Kuroka's face became serious, he sighed for a long time, and said, is this guy okay? Chapter 725-Panic. Kuroka's face became serious, he sighed for a long time, and said, is this guy okay? The body is still quite strong. Besides, you have read a lot of newspapers. Don't you know the news of what happened at Marin Fando? Li Ang asked curiously. If the other party often reads the newspaper, he should find out who he is. But Kuroka's doesn't know himself. This surprised him. Although he is not confident enough, he believes that people all over the world should know himself. However, if you are someone who often reads newspapers and you don't know yourself, you can't say it. The newspapers are still read often. Kuroka's nodded slowly and looked at Li Ang suspiciously. How do I feel? Your face is very familiar to me. I seem to have seen you where? In the newspaper. Li Ang smiled and reminded. That's right. Kuroka's shrank his pupils and nodded, just from the newspaper, let me find it. Still have to find it. Li Ang was a little depressed, shouldn't he be so famous? Some time ago, at least 7 or 8 of the 10 newspapers reported on him. Could it be that this guy, Kuroka's, has such a bad memory? I found it. Kuroka's pulled out a newspaper and read the S. His expression changed at an obvious speed. On Roger's ship, he was just a doctor. Moreover, they haven't experienced too many life and death struggles. Naturally, their mentality is far from being on Roger's ship. Those who originally followed Roger's crew were stronger. When he saw the S of the newspaper, he petrified on the spot. This is fake, right? He picked up the person in the newspaper, and his lips trembled in contrast to Li Ang in front of him. These two are exactly the same. Actually, he encountered this monster here. Not right. Isn't this monster supposed to be in Marin Fando? This moment. He just remembered that his memory was so poor that he saw this monster with his own eyes, but didn't recognize him. It also has a lot to do with his state of mind. How can ordinary people think that such a monster will one day stand in front of him? Therefore, subconsciously, this possibility is ruled out. You are, Li Ang. Kuroka sucked in a breath of cold air, unable to calm down for a long time, and trembled. Even, in his heart, there is still a little panic. As an old senior, he did not dare to show any arrogance in front of Li Ang. Don't be nervous. Li Ang waved his hand and nodded idly. This time, it's finally comfortable. The other party recognizes himself, and this is in line with the development of the matter. He thought so in his heart, and his mood became very happy. Wherever you go, the feeling of being known by everyone is too sour. What are you doing here? Klokas looked at Li Ang nervously and asked. The scary thing is that it happened so coincidentally. He is in the belly of the whale Rabu. And Li Ang, why did he also appear here? Shouldn't this kind of monster be directly beheading the whale Rabu? How could this be? Let Rabu swallow the whole ship. Could it be that he already knew that there was something special in Rabu's belly? Klokas was silent for a moment, thinking to himself. Apart from this possibility, she could never think of any other possibility. Generally speaking, if you have the strength of Li Ang, those who can do it will naturally not sit still. NLT, 47 and GT. Chapter 726 _ Do you need to practice? Someone with terrifying power like Li Ang is still afraid of big whales. This is absolutely nonsense. People with such terrifying strength will naturally not sit still in the face of Rabu the whale. Of course, unless the other party does not want to resist. In this way, it will be swallowed into the stomach smoothly. Think of this. Kuroka's glanced at Li Ang strangely, with a bad expression on his face. Could it be that this guy is really going to enter the belly of a whale? But how did the other party know all this? I take the liberty to ask, how do you know that there is a hole in the belly of a whale? Kuroka's took a deep breath and asked. Guess. The corners of Li Ang's mouth were slightly raised, and he smiled lightly. Seeing that Li Ang didn't plan to say more, Kuroka's didn't ask any more. After all, this is also a monster with terrifying strength. Where can an ordinary person like him ask? Forget it, forget it. Kuroka's shook his head helplessly, thinking to himself. There is nothing to ask for the result. Anyway, these things don't matter. The important thing is, how to make this monster go away. Mr. Li Ang, why are you here? Kukaro's face became very serious, and he asked cautiously. If Li Ang's purpose is this whale, then he has to stop the other party and prevent the other party from succeeding. In the past 10 years of getting along day and night, how to say, he also has feelings. Don't worry, I'm just passing by here. Li Ang waved his hand and said bluntly when he saw Kuroka's nervousness. Is it really that scary? Does Kuroka's need to be so nervous? This is totally unnecessary. He didn't know that every time others saw his appearance, they were scared and chilled. Only those with a few exceptions, those with better tolerance in their hearts, can face Li Ang without feeling too nervous. A little nervousness is unavoidable. Did you pass by? Kuroka's was a little relieved, as long as it didn't come to him or the whale. As for what the other party is going to do, he doesn't care. He didn't want to see the scene where Rabu the whale was slapped to death by Li Ang. Although Rabu's body is huge, Li Ang's strength is even more terrifying. If the two collide, let alone Rabu as a docile creature, even if it is a sea king, it will be difficult to escape Li Ang's palm. Since Li Ang said that he was passing by, Kuroka's was not too suspicious. This monster, there is no need to deceive yourself. Although he has a lot of identity and has sailed with Roger and others, in the final analysis, he is only a doctor who has become a monk halfway. Fighting this kind of thing is far away from him. In the past, in Roger's ship, he was only responsible for logistical supplements. As for fighting, these things never bothered him. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years, no, decades. Kuroka's sighed. Every time he thinks of this, he can't help but think of Roger. It's been a long time since I saw the captain. Although he was only temporary, he still had considerable respect for Roger. This is a captain who makes him worthy of admiration. In particular, the spirit of the other party made it difficult for him to let go now. When he recalled what the other party had said to him back then, he felt a burst of emotion. Immediately. Chapter 726 _ Do you need to practice? And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. Immediately. Kuroka's looked at Li Ang in front of him and smiled bitterly. He could feel the vigorous blood energy hidden in Li Ang's body, which was difficult to hide. In other words, the Li Ang in front of him was extremely terrifying. Compared with everyone he knew, even the white beard at his peak, he was not as terrifying as Li Ang, and could already influence others. Simply relying on blood can deter the enemy. This is not domineering. Those who can do this, naturally, are only those who have exercised their bodies to the extreme. As a doctor, Kuroka's naturally couldn't see that Li Ang's body had been tempered to an indescribably terrifying level. Not to mention the white beard at the peak of the year, even if it is 10 white beards, I am afraid that if you want to compare with the blood and energy of Liang in front of you, there is no comparison. I really want to know, how did you cultivate? Kuroka's looked at Liang bitterly and asked. As a doctor, he couldn't even imagine how Liang became so strong. Gifted. It is understandable that there is definitely talent in it. But it's impossible, it's all talent, right? He would never believe that a person can achieve this level with talent. Obviously, human talents are also limited, and they are invincible at birth. If you tell him this, he won't believe it. What he is more willing to believe is that Liang became such a strong powerhouse because of his hard training. Instead, rely on talent. How did you practice? Liang laughed dumbly, shook his head and said, you shouldn't ask me about this kind of thing. To be honest, you may not believe it. But it's the truth. I don't even know how I cultivate myself. Really? Practice. Is this really necessary for him? Does he really need to practice? The answer is naturally no. He has the existence of the system, and whatever he does, he will get the final result. Whether it is swordsmanship or domineering, he will stand at the top in many fields involved. And this, need process, need exercise. If a process is needed, then Liang will not stand at the top of the world at such an age. Incomprehensible. Kuroka's didn't doubt either. He sighed and said, maybe, this is how a genius cultivates. I'm not a genius, and I'll never understand what it feels like. Facing the genius monster like Liang in front of him, his original self-esteem was completely destroyed. Who else can compare to Liang? At least, he didn't think of any possibility in his own mind. Liang's talent and strength are absolutely top-notch. This made him even doubt his own beliefs. In this world, is there really no one who can become a top powerhouse with absolute talent without training? He didn't know, but there seemed to be such a person in front of him. To be able to reach this realm at such an age, I am afraid that only Liang is alone. He never considered whether Liang would lie. Because it's not necessary. Such lies will not bring any benefits, Liang will lie deliberately. They are already standing at the top of the world. What is the point of the other party lying? Based on the above, Kuroka has no doubts about what Liang said. He never doubted that a person of Liang's level would lie to fool himself. It was as if the king of a kingdom would deliberately lie to an ordinary commoner, which completely lowered his status as a king. And the situation he is facing now is quite similar, and there is no difference. NLT, 49 and GT. Chapter 727-small world. What's incomprehensible about this? It's normal. Liang waved his hand and smiled modestly. You're the only one who thinks that way. I have to admit, you're exactly what the rumors say you are. A monster through and through. Kuroka shook his head and sighed, and said. What he sighed was not only Liang's strength. Moreover, there is also the physique of Liang. With Liang's concentration of qi and blood, I'm afraid it's impossible to get sick. Basically, for any condition has been mutated. As a doctor, although he is old, his eyesight is still there. Liang's physique is basically invulnerable to all poisons. Moreover, he can block any pain, and there is no possibility of getting sick. And terminal illness. If you want to erode Liang, you must at least make Liang old. Now, Liang's blood is strong, and ordinary viruses that invade his body, 0 will be directly wiped out by his majestic blood energy. Even whether it can invade the other's body is unknown. After all, in his opinion, Liang's skin strength is still very terrifying, and ordinary attacks can't cut through the opponent's skin at all. He glanced at it a little and knew the terrifying function of Liang's body. This kind of person, if placed on an island, can bring devastating disaster to the island. If, back then, Captain Roger had such a strong physique, then, these things would never have happened. Kuroka smiled bitterly, feeling even more regretful. He still respected Roger very much, and his philosophy and spirit were admired by him. So, In the end Roger decided to surrender, and they didn't say much, but supported each other from the bottom of their hearts. That terminal illness, so far he has been unable to treat, can be regarded as a great heart disease of his. Over the years, he never forgot to study terminal illnesses that had not yet been studied at the time. Unfortunately, nothing can be done. Not only is it difficult to find people with this terminal illness, but even the combination of some of his own medicines has lost the momentum of his youth. When he was young, he dared to fight hard. Many drug treatments are self-combined. Now that he is old, the medicines he is paired with will be relatively mild. This effect is good and can prevent many people from dying. The treatment of drugs, if the wrong combination, will kill people. He has had many such experiences in the past. Now, he is more peaceful. But it is true that stability can reduce the mortality rate, but there will also be more symptoms that he cannot break through. Without the urge to try it, I also lost the idea of combining many new drugs. In this way, it is undoubtedly difficult for him to break through some new symptoms. It can be regarded as a regret of his later years. However, who in this world is like him? Clokas laughed, looked at Liang in front of him, and muttered to himself. The Liang in front of him is unique. There is only one person in this world who can shake the naval headquarters at such an age. Even if you don't count your age, you can suppress the headquarter of the Navy with one's own power, and that's just one person. Others, even Whitebeard and Roger can't do it. Even the Golden Lion went to the Navy headquarters to make a scene and was eventually arrested. Only Liang, after the riot, not only did nothing happen. On the contrary, the world government and even the Navy headquarters chose to turn a blind eye and did not choose to go to war with Liang. That doesn't explain why. Because, whether it is the world government or the Navy headquarters, they are all afraid of Liang. They were afraid of Liang's strength, so they did not dare to collide and fight with Liang again. It is for this reason that Liang is still rampant in the sea, and anyone who encounters him dares not give him some face. Chapter 727-Small World. It is for this reason that Liang is still rampant in the sea, and anyone who encounters him dares not give him some face. This is much greater than the ability of the four emperors. Can the four emperors do something similar to Liang? Too bad they can't do it. It's not that Kurokas has never seen the strength of the four emperors, the former crew member Shanks, even one of the four emperors. Moreover, he has also seen the strength of the other party to become the fourth queen. It is a pity that with such strength, it is still a long way to shake the headquarters of the Navy. At most, it is evenly divided, but this is already the limit. If you had to fight to the death, none of the four emperors would dare to claim that they could stabilize the naval headquarters. But who dares to say that? Liang in front of him, dare to say so. Mr. Liang, do you want to take you around for a while? Kurokas stood up from his chair and asked gently. Of course, after finally coming here, I naturally want to see it. What is the so-called world in the belly of a whale like? Liang nodded. If nothing else, this place should be the world you created yourself. The whales I know can't possibly have another small world in their stomachs. You saw through. Kurokas laughed out loud without being polite, and directly admitted it. Here, this is a small world he created. Although, it has been perfected now, but it also took him many years. Come on, I'll show you some of the facilities here. Kurokas offered to take the initiative and smiled. Liang didn't refuse either. He followed Kurokas's side, stepping on these continents step by step, walking around. If he hadn't known that this was the belly of a whale, he would have almost thought that this was an ordinary island. However, occasionally the island still has some turbulence. In the belly of a whale, wants stability. Unless, this is when the whale is sleeping, it won't stay safe. This guy Rabu is very naughty. Kurokas laughed. You should have seen those scars on his head. Yes, it came from hitting the red soil continent. Liang nodded with a smile. At this time, Clokas was startled again, with a suspicious expression on his face, and said, "Do you know that?" Slightly heard. Li Ang nodded casually without giving too much explanation. These things, could he say that he knows the development of the plot? Not to mention whether or not it will cause turmoil in the world, Kuroka's in front of him might even think he is a mindless idiot. Okay, in front of it is a small house I built. It can be considered that I usually use it here to pass the time. Kuroka's explained, pointing to a small house in front of 3.8. All the facilities here are built by him personally. So, when I live here, I feel a sense of satisfaction. Everything I create is a natural sense of achievement. The entire small world was created by him, including some things in the environment. He did it himself. It seems that you have a very leisurely time. Li Ang looked at the small house in front of him and smiled. The decoration is not very luxurious, but it is very simple and practical. When people get older, it's easy to do things that they didn't want to do when they were young. And, by creating these, it's like, I'm creating a world. Kuroka's was full of longing and continued, this feeling is very comfortable. If you can experience it once, you will understand what I mean at this moment. NLT, 51 and GT. Chapter 728 On the way to leave. Create the world. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, showing a bit of interest. This is just a small world, so Kuroka's can create it. But if it is a large world, then there is nothing he can do. However, the fact that Kukaros can't do it doesn't mean that Li Ang can't. Maybe this idea can really be tried. Creating a complete world is not just talking about it. It requires top talents in various fields to simulate the living environment before it can be created. Of course. As long as there are more people, it is not impossible to create a small time. But where does the space come from to create for yourself? There is only one whale rab, and the stomach of a sea king may not be suitable for creating a complete world. If it is in the outside world, the world already exists, and you still need to create it yourself. Creating a world is quite complicated. However, creating a kingdom is not that complicated. If you have time, you can try it. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly, thinking to himself. What kind of kingdom to create? Technology. 26 grams of bergapon is needed. With the help of such a technology madman, it is not too difficult to create a technology kingdom. Although, it may take a long time. However, at present, this idea cannot be realized. However, we have to wait until this guy Vegapunk really researches my thoughts. Otherwise, he will not be willing to accompany me to do these things. Li Ang thought to himself and showed a smile. A crazy scientific genius like Vegapunk would, presumably, be happy to create a technological kingdom. The world government will naturally block it. But they dare to challenge Li Ang. If he didn't dare, then he would just kidnap Vegapunk. In the next time, Kuroka's also walked around this small world with Li Ang, introducing a lot of things to Li Ang. Although the two were not very familiar with each other, they got to know each other a little during the conversation. It was hard to hide that when Kuroka's faced Li Ang, he still had a lot of nervousness. With the passage of time, it may be reduced a lot. However, the tension in my heart could not be completely eliminated. Faced with such a terrifying character, do you want to be nervous? This requires a certain amount of perseverance and a mentality of identification, but he, Kuroka's, does not have any of these. He's just a doctor, and he doesn't have too much fighting power. His extraordinary status is because he once boarded the Pirate King's pirate group. Therefore, his identity is not simple, and he has more knowledge. This does not mean that he has a very tyrannical strength. Besides, the people on the One Piece ship must have strong strength. Not necessarily. It's just that the people know, such as Rayleigh, the redhead, etc., are all very strong people. As for those weak people, they are just unknown, and no one pays attention to them deliberately. And Kuroka's is also a person who does not receive much attention from others. Unlike Rayleigh, although he retired, occasionally people from the Navy headquarters would pay attention. Such a strong person, they are naturally very worried. What about Liang? The Navy headquarters has never wanted to pay attention, but they dare not. Rayleigh's strength, they can still bear. But they dare not compliment Liang's strength. If they could compete, they would not have let the entire naval headquarters bow to Liang. It's just that they can't fight. Liang's strength is so strong that they don't think they can beat each other at all. Chapter 728 On the way to leave. NGT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. It's just that they can't fight. Liang's strength is so strong that they don't think they can beat each other at all. In this case, what else can I do besides bowing my head? It took about half an hour. Basically. Under the leadership of Kurokaze, Liang also understood the surrounding environment. The world in the stomach is never the real sea, and the area is limited. Although you can't see the edge at a glance, it doesn't mean it's endless. Compared to the real sea, this place can only be regarded as a drop in the ocean. The other side. Hancock, Tautu, Tina and others have also finished their observation and returned to Liang. Youth. Kurokaze looked at the peerless woman standing beside Liang and said with emotion. It seems that he also remembered the past when he was young. Yanfu is not shallow, this is really enviable. Kurokaze looked at Liang and joked. After talking with Liang for half an hour, he can be regarded as letting go a little. According to rumors, Liang is a murderous executioner, but now he has a little understanding of Liang. Before provoking Liang, the other party was just a gentle and polite young man. However, after provoking the other party, perhaps, the other party will act as rumored, killing people without blinking an eye. This kind of person is not scary. Just need to pay attention, it is convenient not to provoke. I think back then, when I was young, I was a heartthrob. Kurokaze showed a bit of nostalgia and smiled. You're bald. Liang glanced at Kurokaze's bald head and smiled. Ah. Kurokaze almost choked, glanced at Liang angrily, and said, I'm talking about when I was young. Now that people are old, their hair will definitely be bald. Really, I've seen Warring States, Garp, and the others, but they're not like this. At most, their hair is white. Liang continued with a smile. Forget it, I won't discuss these issues with you Monster 073. Quote. Kurokaze waved his hand and surrendered. You can't beat it, you can't justify it, what else can you do other than surrender? Since I've finished reading it, I want to ask, how do I get out here? Liang looked at the area ahead and asked. How to leave? Kurokaze said with a smile, with your knowledge, I think you should know how to leave. In my opinion, you should have your own unique way of getting out of here. Liang looked at Kurokaze with a smile and said. If he could leave the whale's belly a little more gently, he would naturally not make a move. But if there is no way, it can only take some drastic measures. You have seen it. However, I would like to know, if you are here and do not see my words. Then, with your knowledge, what way would you choose to leave? Kurokaze smiled even more and spoke again. Do you really want to hear my thoughts? Liang glanced at Kurokaze and asked again. He is not sure. After speaking out, will Kurokaze hack himself to death? My own method is very simple and rude. It doesn't matter if you listen to it. Kukaro's nodded and said with some anticipation. Chapter 729 Kurokaze of Remorse. I'm really afraid to say it, you will be surprised. Liang smiled and said again. It doesn't matter if there is one more way to leave anyway. Kurokaze continued to ask, he had been here for so many years, and he also needed to communicate with the whale Rabu before he could leave. In contrast, he was more curious, how would Liang leave? I'm sure you won't want to hear it. Liang waved his hand and said bluntly, however, since you said so, I will definitely tell you what I thought at the beginning. When I first came in, I didn't expect anyone here. Considering that there is no one here, my first choice is to use the pain to let it open its mouth. I think in its stomach, it should also be in pain. Speaking of which, Crocus's expression changed a bit, and his expression became unpleasant. Look, I said it. Li Ang thought to himself, and continued, the second method is more simple and rude. Just cut it open with a knife, and you don't need to care about everything. It's my fault. Crocus glanced at Li Ang resentfully and said, I shouldn't have listened to your thoughts, it's my fault, I was careless. Have you accompanied Rab for so many years? How could Li Ang kill Rabu? Was it because he was too impulsive to let this terrifying monster say a way to get out of here? Don't you have no brain? But fortunately, I have my own company, otherwise, it is hard to imagine how tragic the end of the whale Rabu will be. I told you earlier. Li Ang smiled innocently. A long time. He was a little curious about Crocus's way and asked, what kind of way did you say leaving? My method is naturally much better than yours. You will seriously injure Rabu with all your tricks. In my case, as long as you use some signals, Rabu will speak. Crocus calmed down a little and said, it's your own method. Otherwise, according to Li Ang's method, wouldn't Rabu have to die hundreds of times? Fortunately, I was in Rab's belly. Otherwise, with the monster character of Li Ang, what else can't be done? It is not impossible to split Rabu's body alive. Your way is the gentlest. Li Ang smiled, he had guessed this method. After living for more than 10 years, Rab would more or less obey some of his words. It doesn't seem to be a problem to want to enter the other's stomach freely. How are you, do you want to go out? Kukaros asked with a smile. Of course, after staying here for a long time, people are quite boring. Li Ang nodded and said bluntly. The environment here is almost familiar, and that's it. Before entering here, you will think that the small world in the belly of the whale is a great construction. But after staying here for a long time, there is no interest in anything. Young man. Crocus laughed and didn't care. Only an old man like him would be suitable for this kind of uncontested environment. Come on, I'll take you out. Crocus walked to the side and stood on a small wooden sail. Come to think of it, this should be how he got into Labu's stomach. Totally impossible, swim in. Let's go. After Li Ang nodded, he led Hancock and Wei Wei and his party, and gradually landed on the deck of the warship. Front. Crocus slid the wooden sails with both hands and led Li Ang's entire warship to gradually leave the area. Being able to enter the belly of a whale is an incredible thing. What we saw today has once again allowed Hancock and others to expand their understanding of the world. Chapter 729 Feet the Resentment of Crocus. What we saw today has once again allowed Hancock and others to expand their understanding of the world. It turned out that in the past, there were still many things that I didn't know. It's amazing. Wei Wei still looked back at the scene behind her and whispered to herself. It's hard to accept that this complete island and heaven and earth are actually in the stomach of a creature. However, after a while, after going out, she will naturally know the truth of the matter. She didn't want to miss this process. Whoa! The sea splashed up. Reached the frontmost position and encountered an obstacle. Rab. Crocus stood on the raft, and his voice came out rough. A crisp voice came out, it seemed, was the whale's response. Gradually. The originally blocked wall gradually separated, and a dazzling sunlight shone down, so dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. This is the difference between the world inside and the world outside. The world in the stomach has never brought such a strong vision. Outside, it is now noon, and the sun is fierce. Sure enough. Hancock, Wei Wei and the others were full of amazement, looking at the endless sea in front of them. Under the leadership of Crocus. Their entire warship also sailed out gradually. Just landed on the sea's surface. Li Ang and the others turned around and looked at the huge eye behind him, which was almost bigger than the entire warship. One eye is almost comparable to a warship, and it is no wonder that the area in the stomach is so vast and boundless. Diaresis a whale. Wei Wei's pink lips parted slightly, looking at the whole picture of this behemoth, and exclaimed. Sure enough, just now, they were in the stomach of a creature. This experience was the first time she had ever experienced it. What? Etc. Her beautiful eyes flashed, and she saw the pirate flag of the Straw Hat Gang, and then looked at the many scars on Rabu's head, and said, "Is this, Rabu?" "Oh, almost forgot, you've seen it before." Li Ang looked at Wei Wei and said with a smile. When Alabasta was in crisis, Vivi had left Alabasta. Moreover, it happened to be the time to meet the Straw Hat Boy. At that time, it seemed that the collision was here at Upside Down Mountain. It's no wonder that Vivi knew about Rab's existence. But it's only now that I realize it. Is it a bit too nervous? Good, more than ever. Wei Wei's pretty face was a little red, and she looked at Rabu with embarrassment. At that time, she was still on a mission, and she wanted to do something to Rabu. However, these things are over. At that time, she just wanted to win the trust of Baroque workers. But I didn't expect that the other party was just using her all the time. Her identity is no secret from beginning to end. When she thought of herself at that time, her pretty face was flushed. At that time, she was simply too simple and too stupid. What, Wei Wei, have you seen it? Tina opened her pink lips slightly, looked at Wei Wei, and said. Accident, accident. Wei Wei explained quickly and put aside the topic. These things are all about the old Huang Li, and she doesn't want to expose these shameful things again. Only Li Ang, looking at Wei Wei with a smile that is not a smile, made Wei Wei feel a little ashamed. Her delicate face was so red that it was hot. Chapter 730-Guests. Lian Wei Wei, an innocent little princess, still has a lot of unbearable past events. At the beginning, in order to save Alabasta, he joined the Baroque Walker Work Club alone, trying to figure out the opponent's true intentions and break into the enemy's interior. Although they follow Equilem, the strength of the two of them, in the Baroque Works Club, is only a character like a pawn. Usually, the key tasks are really involved, and naturally it is not their turn. Only some ordinary small tasks on the periphery are what they need to perform. In the end, not only did he fail to penetrate the enemy's interior, but he was directly discovered by the enemy. Fortunately, when she was an agent of the Baroque Works Society, she and the Straw Hats gang helped him clean up the Baroque Works Society, and Alabasta returned to its former prosperity. She is still grateful for the Straw Hats. And the whale Rab, it is not the first time she has met. Just at the beginning, when she was in the belly of the whale, she didn't expect it to be Rab. Now she saw the crooked flag of the pirates, and then she reacted. Wei Wei, you still have a little secret. Tina looked at Wei Wei very interestingly and whispered. 037 being watched by the three girls, Wei Wei's pretty face became hot, and she was embarrassed to state what happened at the beginning. Whoa! The sea splashed up. The giant whale Rabu gradually escaped into the sea. Li Ang and others stood on the deck of the warship, looking at Kurokas who was standing on a raft not far away. Several, are you going to sit with me? Kurokas smiled at Li Ang and asked. If I can, of course I'd love to. Li Ang smiled and nodded. I just came to the twin gorges of Upside Down Mountain, and naturally I have to stay for a while. If we continue to sail, it may be that we really have to leave the Great Waterway. If you want to go back again, it will take a certain amount of time. He thought that the time for this line of wandering was almost over. If it is not necessary, there is no need to rush to the remaining 4 sea areas. Of course, if you have the time, you can do that too. But Vivi is, after all, a princess of Alabasta, although Cobra has recovered. But the importance of Wei Wei is still very obvious, and many affairs are handled by Wei Wei. She is away for too long, the affairs of Alabasta will become a CGDH mess. Soon. Under the leadership of Kurokas, the warship gradually approached the shore of the Red Continent. Here is the second place where the Red Earth continent and the Great Waterway intersect, and the first is the Holy Land Mary Joa. It can also be considered that as long as the Red Soil continent here is crossed, then you can directly reach the end of the Great Channel. This is an amazing place. It can lead to the Four Seas, and it is also the place where the Four Seas enter the Great Channel. It is the place where countless pirates take the first step for their dreams. Likewise, it also represents the end point. Because behind the Red Earth continent is the end of the Great Waterway. It's just that the Red Earth continent is so huge that it directly blocks it off. It can be understood that if you stand on the sky and look down, the left side of the Red Soil continent is the end of the Great Channel, and the right side of the Red Soil continent is the starting point of the Great Channel. In the middle, the laterite continent is used as a blocking object to separate the two. If I can cross this Red Earth continent, can I just ignore the many troubles in the New World? Go straight to the end of the Red Earth continent. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he said slowly with a smile on his face. Looks like you know that too. Kuroka's glanced at Li Ang and smiled. Of course, you still have to understand this little geographical common sense. Chapter 730-guests. Of course, you still have to understand this little geographical common sense. Li Ang nodded, but did not deny it. However, it is also a very difficult thing to cross the Red Soil continent. Otherwise, everyone can enter the end of the Great Waterway from here. How can it be possible to honestly go from here to the Chambord Archipelago to dive into the Fishman Island and enter the New World? This cyclical and gradual process will naturally take a lot of time. But crossing the Red Soil continent here will take more time. The most important place is the end of the Great Waterway does not necessarily mean the final island of Ralph Drew. At the end, there is still a vast and boundless sea. Who can determine where this island is? Perhaps he knew a thing or two about Kuroka's in front of him. After all, he was also the one who boarded Pirate King Roger's ship. And, before he got on the ship, Roger had not yet become One Piece. It was after he boarded the ship that Roger arrived at the final island and became the Pirate King. But don't think about it, even if it is possible to cross from here. However, it is basically impossible to find the island. It's not just about luck, but also a lot of clues. If it weren't for the year, Cloacus said in a low voice with a side expression on his face. Having said that, he recalled the days when he was on the ship of Roger the Pirate King. He wasn't really a crew member, but at least he was half. Come on, I'm not interested in any of this anyway. Li Ang waved his hand and said bluntly. If he was interested, he would have entered the New World long ago. How could he be so leisurely now? However, he wouldn't mind if he could reach the final island easily. If you do it deliberately, it will appear very troublesome. Oh, not interested, that's right. Kuroka smiled and said, with your strength, it's actually not difficult to do this. If you're interested, I think your success rate should be the highest among all the people in the ocean. You look up to me like that. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly interested. Why do you see it? Intuition. Kukaros thought for a long time and answered. Intuition is naturally impossible to verify. He thinks that Li Ang has the highest success rate, not only because of Li Ang's strength, but he always feels that Li Ang seems to know something in his head. Even he didn't dare to say whether he could find the final island if he went on a second voyage now. Intuition. You're not a woman. Li Ang smiled and said. Isn't intuition what women are best at? Why, the old man Krokus actually said intuition. It's just a feeling, don't take it too seriously. Kukaros waved his hand and led Li Ang and the others to walk on the Red Soil continent. At this time, his footsteps stopped, looking at the position on the shore. At some point, a small wooden sail appeared here. Someone. Li Ang's eyes flashed and he smiled. A guest is here. Kukaros didn't feel the slightest surprise and nodded in recognition. He was very familiar with this person. and he was not surprised by the arrival of the other party. It's just that, after so many years, this guy actually came to see him. This is a very strange thing. Chapter 731 _ Guy Spark Jabba. Is it convenient? Li Ang asked casually. If it's inconvenient, it doesn't matter if he leaves. However, he was intrigued by who the guest Kurokas was talking about. Kurokas also has guests. He was in his 70s and 80s, so the guests he mentioned were naturally quite old. How many people did he know back then who would visit him? Could it be? Li Ang's eyes narrowed slightly, and he had some guesses in his heart. It's okay. Kurokas shook his head and said with some anticipation, I think, the guest I mentioned, he should also miss you and meet him. Oh. Li Ang was even more interested. Want to see yourself? Who is this person? Come on, he's a very familiar guy. I think he should have been waiting for me on my site. You come with me. Kurokas walked in front and acted as a leader. Li Ang left with Hancock, Wei Wei and others behind him step by step. He was very curious about the so-called guests. A few minutes later, Kurokas led Li Ang and others to a cave made of stone. Presumably, Kurokas has lived in Rabu's belly for so many years. Live in this cave. Today, it is very appropriate for the primitive people. Before he got close, Li Ang felt it, and a breath came out of the cave. The arrogance of seeing and hearing spreads directly. He felt that this person is very strong. At least, it is a terrifying existence on the same level as the general. And this person's blood is slightly weakened, otherwise, his strength is definitely a bit stronger than the general. An old man. The corner of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, restraining his domineering look. A figure appeared in his head. If you guessed correctly, it should be this person. Rare customer, rare customer. Without any hesitation, Kurokas stepped forward and walked into the grotto, laughing loudly. Li Ang and others also followed. The light in the grotto was bright, and any measures inside could be clearly seen. Occasionally there are holes that allow sunlight to get in. What a strange place. Wei Wei muttered in a low voice, looking at the surrounding scene, said. If she was allowed to live alone in this environment, she couldn't stand it. In this regard, she admires this old man a little, and can endure so many years of loneliness. Hancock, Tautu, and Tina looked at Li Ang and whispered, I feel it, this person inside is very strong. Of course, no accident, this is the person on the one-piece ship. If his strength is not strong, then it can't be justified. Li Ang kept a smile and explained. Is it someone from the one-piece ship again? Tautu was a little surprised, covered her pink lips, and said. It's nothing unusual. Kurokas was originally half of the crew of One Piece, and it is normal for him to have contact with those people. Li Ang said very calmly, let's go, we can't keep them waiting for a long time. Yeah. Hancock nodded slightly, shaking his jet black hair. They were also a little curious about the people on the one-piece ship. After walking around for a while, Li Ang arrived at Kurokas's side smoothly. In front of him, the author was a bald old man with a tattoo engraved on his bald head, wearing a small black spectacles, and a gold ear hanging on his right ear. Ring. It seems that he is not young, probably in his 60s. The figure is like an ordinary old man, looking a little thin and dry, and the flesh and blood have slipped very much. On the surface, it looks like the kind of old man that ordinary people can easily bully. Chapter 731 _ Guy Spark Jabba. On the surface, it looks like the kind of old man that ordinary people can easily bully. But after seeing this person, Li Ang confirmed his guess. Mr. Li Ang, this is my former partner. Kukaros laughed and introduced, his name is Spark Jabba. Bronze Spark Jabba. Li Ang nodded, determined in his heart. On Roger's ship, in addition to Roger and Rayleigh, the third in command is Jabba Spark, the man known as Roger's left hand. Roger represents gold, Raleigh represents silver, and Spark Jabba represents copper, also known as the Bronze Guy. Li Ang. Spark Jabba looked at Li Ang and said nothing for a long time. In terms of seniority, he is several generations higher than Li Ang, but in terms of identity and strength, he is far from Li Ang. Even Rayleigh didn't dare to say a word in front of Li Ang, and Spark Jabba naturally couldn't be too arrogant. However, the first time they met, his sense of Li Ang was relatively positive. At least, Li Ang isn't like the rumored executioner who kills anyone he sees. It's very different from the rumored one. Spark Jabba said with a hint of emotion. What he said was naturally Li Ang. The rumored Li Ang, who kills like numbness, is a frightening and terrifying powerhouse, who will not spare even the weak and slaughter any enemy. But looking at it today, Spark Jabba believes that at least the rumors are not entirely true. It is a fact that the killing is decisive. The rich blood permeated in Li Ang's body allows him to judge. But not necessarily, it is an executioner who kills people when he sees them. Huh. Spark Jabba looked at the knife that Li Ang was carrying, and couldn't help but blurt it out, "This is, the first-generation ghost." "You know what?" Li Ang said slowly with a smile on his face. Spark Jabba, he naturally knows the identity of the other party. However, he was also not nervous at all. It's just a crew member on Roger's ship, although the status may be higher than that of ordinary crew members. But in front of Li Ang, even if Roger was resurrected, he couldn't make his expression change too much. Not to mention, a Sparky Jabba. Just seeing a legendary pirate here, Li Ang was deeply surprised. These pirates usually live in seclusion in areas that no one cares about. It is difficult to meet these pirates in this world. I didn't expect to meet you today. I know, among the old things of the 5 old stars, there is a personal use. Li Ang is indeed Li Ang, and there is no difference with the rumored strength. It will even be stronger. Spark Jabba showed some admiration and seriousness, said. Why did the first-generation ghost Toru appear in the opponent's hand? Originally belonged to the 5 old stars, but now belongs to Li Ang. Among them, if there were no battles and disputes, he would definitely not believe it. Now that the battle broke out, the first-generation Goosh appeared on Li Ang's body again. He also had an answer in his heart. 5 old stars, I am afraid that they will lose to Li Ang in front of Li. 5 people lost together. It's still very possible, it's just that the newspapers haven't published it. It's not easy, I've never heard your name before. It's unprecedented to be able to reach such a level at such an age. Spark Jabba said with a strong bitterness in his tone. Think back to how much time it took him to cultivate such a state. But seeing Li Ang in front of him, he can already be sure. Talent is something that can really affect a person's highest achievement. Chapter 732 _ Where is the final island? If Li Ang in front of him had no talent, could he really achieve such a high level? At least, he doesn't think in his heart that this can be achieved by hard work. Efforts can become stronger, but, like Li Ang, he can't become stronger so quickly. At such an age, standing at the top of the level. He didn't know that Li Ang was a simple and rude opening. Small achievements are not great achievements. Li Ang smiled and said very modestly. Aside. The corners of Kukaro's mouth twitched. Modesty can be modest, but it has already reached this point. Is it too modest? With what Li Ang has done before, is this just a small achievement? Then someone else became a general or something, isn't it? It's a trivial matter. The afterlife is terrifying. Spark Jabba naturally did not dare to look down on him too much. Li Ang's words, for himself, or, 2, 4, 3, may be only a small achievement. But for these people, even if they once arrived at Ralph Drew, it does not mean that their achievements are higher than that of Li Ang. It can be considered that the achievements of Li Ang in front of him cannot be replicated. This kind of strength is the only one. Stronger than the 4 emperors, Jabba Spark is the first time he has seen such a terrifying person. In the past, he only saw it in the newspapers. Now he finally saw it with his own eyes, a very strong man. It's rare to meet each other, why don't you have a few drinks? Kukaros looked at Leon and Spark Jabba with a smile and asked. Yes. Liang nodded and smiled. We're going out first. Hancock's pretty face moved slightly, leaning against Liang's ear and whispering. The next thing, they are here, is not very good. Immediately, she proposed to prepare to leave here with the girls. Go back to the warship, we should be leaving later. Liang nodded and said. Yeah. Hancock took Wei Wei and others, and the 4 girls gradually left the cave. The rest of the people here are Liang, Kukaros, and the copper guy Spark Jabba. Yanfu is not shallow, it's really enviable. Spark Jabba looked at Liang and joked. However, this is also the kind of treatment that Liang possesses because of his extraordinary strength. Ordinary people, without such strength, how can they attract women's attention? Moreover, he did not think that this was Liang taking advantage of it, and it should be said that who could follow Liang, which woman did not have great luck. There are thousands of beautiful women in this world, even if they are rare, there are still many. But Liang was the only one, and there was only such a terrifying monster in the world. If you're half as handsome as me, I think so can you. Liang laughed and said. Speaking of these, he showed no signs of blushing. This face made Kurokas and Spark Jabba stunned, and they were envious. In front of others, you can still praise yourself calmly, without any blush, how thick your skin is. If I was as thick-skinned as you, I might have descendants. Spark Jabba looked at Liang and said speechlessly. After some conversation, his fear of Liang gradually diminished. Chapter 732 Where is the final island? NGT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. After some conversation, his fear of Liang gradually diminished. It's not about going to war, what's there to be afraid of? The tension is there, but it's not that serious. I can understand that you are complimenting me in disguise. Liang smiled and didn't care. This is a fine wine that I treasure. If I hadn't seen the guests, I would be reluctant to drink it. Kurokas took out the wine barrel from the side, and said very reluctantly. Look at you, what kind of wine have I never drunk? Spark Jabba glanced at Kurokas with contempt and said. You don't have backache while you're standing and talking. You've drank all your own wine. I doubt that you came to me this time to drink alcohol, right? Kurokas was a little skeptical. Bullshit. Spark Jabba blushed and shouted. Although, it is undeniable that he still has some thoughts in his heart. But when it was said face to face, he would definitely not admit it. In the sea, not many people know him anymore, so he still tries his best to avoid letting others discover his existence. Since they have already washed their hands, naturally they can no longer break out some conflicts with the Navy. By the way, where is the final island? Liang's mouth moved slightly, drinking wine and asking with a smile. He was also very curious about this answer. Although he doesn't plan to go, if he can know, he doesn't mind knowing more. Hearing this, both Kurokas and Spark Jabba were silent for a while. Spark Jabba looked at Liang suspiciously, and said, You really want to know? I don't think you can accept the results obtained without your own strength. I don't want to be the pirate king, I just asked casually. You can say what you want to say, if you don't want to say it, forget it. Liang said very easily, without any pressure. One Piece. What is the use of One Piece? Even if he has a plan, he wants to create a technology kingdom. As for the title of One Piece, what does it mean to him? Can One Piece rule the world? The answer is negative. However, having created a country of science and technology, Liang really has this assurance that he can take the whole world into his pocket. If things like planes, cannons, and rockets are created, there are really few people who can stop them except the natural system. Even the natural system cannot block some radiation attacks. If a nuclear explosion is researched, even if it can be elementalized, it cannot prevent the ending of death. If you are hit by strong radiation, even a general will have to hate it on the spot. Thinking of this, the genius scientist Vegapunk appeared in his mind. I don't know, has this guy succeeded in researching the plane he wants so far? If not, it would be a real shame. Vegapunk's brain is not bad, but what he lacks is a lot of professional knowledge. If he can research a direction in his own way, Li Ang will naturally give the other side some of the next technology to develop. Of course. If the plane was really developed, Li Ang would destroy it without saying a word and take Vegapunk away. 2.4 How to say, can't let the Navy headquarters occupy this unique advantage. If you create a technological kingdom, you have to kidnap Vegapunk. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. However, it had to be silent, so that no one could notice it, so he kidnapped Vegapunk. He believes that with the scientific knowledge in his head, isn't it normal to want to fascinate Vegapunk? A scientific genius is naturally unable to resist his enthusiasm for science. The allure of science will induce every positive scientist to carry out research all the time. Among them, Vegapunk's mood is even more obvious. The reason why a genius scientist is called a genius scientist, in addition to his talent and brain, is that the most important thing is that he knows how to conduct in-depth research, and when he encounters any problem, he has the determination to break the casserole and ask to the end. Chapter 733 _ The simulation was successful. Return. Chapter 733 _ The simulation was successful. Chapter 734 _ Small talk. Li Ang, who was far away in Upside Down Mountain, naturally did not know what happened to Marin Fando. He also didn't know that Vegapunk had already made a noticeable progress. Although only the mold is successful, it is not a difficult problem to create a large machine with this mold. The most important thing is that you need certain materials and common sense in all aspects. But with the first success, next, there is also a big step towards the goal of ultimate success. At this time, inside the grotto, Spark Jabba looked at Li Ang in front of him with a bit of interest and smiled. You really want to know? Am I still joking with you? Li Ang said with a smile. The address of the final island is nothing more than an earth-shattering thing. Of course. This sentence is only for him. If it is for the rest of the pirates, these clues are quite important. For example, the 4 emperors, the road signs collected are all to rush to Ralph. If they can directly know the direction of Ralph Drew, how can they be indifferent? Actually, Spark Jabba took a sip of wine and said bluntly, I don't know a real address either. This is the truth. I didn't mean to fool you, you know. Even you don't know. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly and said slowly. I don't know, and it's normal. After all, to be able to go to Ralph Drew depends on the ability of this guy Roger. And we are just playing soy sauce all the way. Spark Jabba waved his hand helplessly and said. However, for some news, he still knows. After all, as the third in command on Roger's ship, it would be a shame if he didn't know. Just say anything, I'm just curious, not a must. Li Ang said again with a smile. Nor is he really going to Ralph Drew, which is the dream land of all pirates. But he is not a pirate, and he has no interest in the so-called big secret treasure. Asked about the address, just curious, nothing. Coming to this world, as Ralph Drew, the world's biggest secret, he is naturally curious. This is also inevitable. It's okay to say whatever you want, Tilda. Spark Jabba nodded. Some simple information, you probably don't know. Then I'll tell you, it's not unreasonable that Ralph Drew is known as the final island. How should I put it? It's not an island in the true sense. Quote. Down with these words. Let Li Ang have a little understanding of Ralph Drew, but if you want to investigate deeply, you have to keep groping yourself. He wouldn't do such a troublesome thing easily. By the way, if you cross the Red Soil continent, what do you think? Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. Crossing the Red Continent. Spark Jabba was stunned for a moment, obviously not expecting Liang to ask such a question. You're referring to the Red Earth continent here, not the Holy Land Mary Joa. Kukaros said with a smile. Yes. Liang nodded in recognition. He was also curious about how the two older generation would answer this question. Chapter 734-chat. He was also curious about how the two older generation would answer this question. This is a very profound question. How should I put it? In theory, it is feasible. Crossing this red soil continent, it is naturally the end of the Great Waterway. However, the area of the red soil continent is not small. If it is on land, I am afraid that it will take many years to reach the end of the Great Waterway. Also, the dangers of climbing are high. There is no boat-like tool for long journeys on land. Spark Jabba's explanation is not unreasonable. If Liang does it, he can reach the end of the Great Channel 100%. However, even if you reach the end of the Great Channel, you may not be able to see Lovedrew. That's what it means. The end of the Great Fairway doesn't mean Ralph Drew. And Ralph Drew is only at the end of the Great Waterway, not the sea area that represents the end of the entire Great Waterway. This needs to be clarified. This idea is very strange. In the past, we never thought of taking shortcuts. If we didn't rush all the way through the sea, what's the point of reaching the end of the Great Waterway? Spark Jabba said with a smile. It works in theory, and if I get the chance, I can try it too. Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. With your strength, you can do it. I can still confirm that. However, it is not so simple to find Ralph Drew. Spark Jabba continued. Aside. Kurokas also nodded. Ralph Drew is hidden in a very strange location. Even if we old guys go again, we may not be able to find this route. The route of the year is also forgotten. That's why. Besides, we have no intention of remembering these routes. As a former pirate, if you walk once, forget it. Life is just such a chance. Diaresis, as for the second time, I can't go any longer, and it doesn't make sense. Spark Jabba said. As a pirate, being able to go once is enough. The second time, just leave it to some motivated younger generation. That's right, only the first time makes sense. As for the second time, it's just a waste of time. You all know what's in it. Furthermore, you are no longer pirates, and you have already washed your hands with gold, so naturally you will not intervene in the middle of these things. Remembering these routes seems to be useless. Liang smiled and said. If it were him, he wouldn't remember these routes either. After more than 10 years, the memory of these old pirates is not so strong that they are still fresh in memory. Speaking of which, basically, Liang understands everything that should be understood. For the rest, he can only rely on him to practice. But, if you have the time, let's talk about it. Now, he doesn't want to go to Ralph Drew. Contrary, he is not a pirate, nor does he hope to get the treasure there. In other words, the treasures there are not as attractive to him as those pirates. He also didn't care about the title of One Piece. Therefore, Ralph Drew is the ultimate dream land for pirates. For Liang, it's just a slightly mysterious island. To go or not to go is only between his thoughts. He has no shortage of treasures, nor does he want the title of One Piece. What else could attract him, Ralph Drew? World government hidden secrets. A blank 100 years. These have little to do with him. If he wants to know what the world government has covered up, he doesn't need to be so troublesome. He just needs to sneak into the Holy Land Mary Joa, and naturally he can gain a lot of useful information. As for the blank 100 years. He was a little curious, but just curious, not to the point where he had to know the truth. Chapter 735-long experience. You are quite right. Jabba Spark nodded and drank the wine from his glass. Maybe this guy really came here to drink. This made the corner of Kurokas's mouth twitched, You kid, save it. This is what I have worked so hard to save. If you are good, just drink it up. What should I do? Should I still drink alcohol? Kuroka's looked at Spark Jabba helplessly, speechless for a while. Although the Roger Pirates had disbanded, the former third-in-command was still quite majestic in Kuroka's heart, and he did not dare to say anything more blatantly. By the way, why do you have time to come to me? Kuroka's asked, looking at Spaka Jabba next to him. Could it be that you can't come if you don't have time? I just came to see my old buddy. You old buddy is fine, and you actually asked me these questions in turn. It's kind of a donkey liver and lungs. Spark Jabba glared at Kuroka's and said. Come less. Kukaro's was very calm and said lightly, when you came, 1/3 of the wine I treasured disappeared. This is just the beginning. I'm afraid that today is over and you have drank all my wine. How can you, at most, leave 1/3 for you? Spark Jabba laughed and whispered. Go away. Kukaro's forehead burst with blue veins, shouting loudly. 1/3 for yourself. Why don't you go to 557 to grab it? I'm here to rob. It doesn't make any difference. Spark Jabba said casually. Are you doing this again? Kuroka's looked at Spark Jabba suspiciously, with a bit of vigilance and anger on his expression. Didn't you say, don't spy on my inner thoughts in the future? You bastard, why don't you listen to people? Okay, I won't do this in the future. Spark Jabba quickly waved his hand and said. It's better to do less when looking into other people's hearts. He turned his eyes and looked at Liang beside him with a strange look in his eyes. You can also hear the inner voice of man. Liang asked with a bit of surprise on his face. Could it be that you can too? Spark Jabba was also surprised and asked. Seeing, hearing, and coloring have been practiced to the extreme, and naturally, they will. Liang kept a smile and said slowly. He was surprised that Jabba Spark could read the minds of others. Seeing the color. Sparks Jabba and Kuroka's eyes became very strange. Why, this guy and the captain's abilities are so similar. Don't you, aren't you? CHFJ, Liang asked suspiciously. From this point of view, it seems that Spark Jabba is not the ability that only has the ability to see and hear to the extreme. I am the capable one. Spark Jabba coughed dryly, his eyes became more and more strange, staring at Liang without moving. That's my misjudgment. What is your ability? Liang was also a little surprised. He didn't expect that it wasn't the ability that he only possessed when he had cultivated to the extreme. But devil fruit. What is the opponent's devil fruit? Chicken rib ability. Spark Jabba sighed helplessly, and seemed reluctant to talk about his devil fruit. Kuroka's on the side also said, completely tasteless, his strength is only by virtue of a tyrannical swordsmanship. As for the devil fruit, this not only did not give him a certain strength, but also limited his ability. Quote. Chapter 735_long experience. Kuroka's on the side also said, completely tasteless, his strength is only by virtue of a tyrannical swordsmanship. As for the devil fruit, this not only did not give him a certain strength, but also limited his ability. Quote. Even, not being able to fall into the sea has inexplicably added a weakness to him. Over the years, he has no idea how many times he has complained about his devil fruit. So scary, can't develop. Liang's mouth moved slightly, and he couldn't help asking. There are no garbage devil fruits, only garbage users. He remembered this sentence deeply. Any ability of the devil fruit is never garbage. It just depends on how the user will use it. With Spark Jabba's knowledge, can't he make good use of a devil fruit? This seems to be too ridiculous. Do you think that any devil fruit has a good side? Spark Jabba looked at Liang faintly and asked in a low voice. Isn't it? Liang nodded and asked back. In his opinion, this sentence is also correct. There is no weak devil fruit. It only depends on the degree of development and the understanding of this devil fruit, in order to develop the true power of the devil fruit. Even the weakest devil fruit in the mouths of others, as long as it is developed properly, it cannot be weak. This is what Li Ang used to think about devil fruits. This is also the opinion of a large number of strong people on devil fruit. You're right, but... Kukaros smiled bitterly and said. I am the only exception. Spark Jabba was speechless, shook his head and sighed, my devil fruit is really useless. Others, no matter how weak the devil fruit is, as long as they are developed properly, they can have strong power. However, mine different. I have been developing for no less than 10 years, but there is still no progress. At this moment, I suspect that someone deliberately framed me. With my talent, I can't even study a devil fruit for more than 10 years, but I can't study his ordinary moves. This is too ridiculous. If it was you, would you believe it? Quote. It's really so rubbish. Li Ang was a little suspicious and asked. Otherwise, you think I'm one of those brats? Don't know how to develop devil fruits. It's not that I don't have the ability to develop them, but this devil fruit is just so rubbish. Spark Jabba was more bitter, said. If he had known, he should not have eaten this devil fruit. It's better now, it's not just that I haven't gotten stronger. On the contrary, it added a lot of burden to himself. In the past, I was a good swimmer. But now what? It was directly reduced to a landslide. The change in it made him unable to accept it. It was all too impulsive at the time. If he were to choose now, he would rather not eat any devil fruit than eat such a garbage devil fruit. It turns out that there are really trash devil fruits. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he learned a lot. He used to think that there are only weak powers, but no weak devil fruit. But now, after seeing Jabba Sparks, it seems that the idea is self-defeating. How could he not believe the real case that happened in front of his eyes? Is Spark Jabba a brainless person? He is clearly not. Is he incompetent? Apparently neither. Otherwise, he would not be in the third position of the Roger Pirates. But even such a tyrannical person, after more than 10 years of research, still has not developed any ability from the devil fruit that can help him. How could this make him not angry? Has it gotten stronger? No. Moreover, he also added an obvious weakness to himself. He was afraid of seawater, and if he was hit by a seafloor stone, he would also be powerless. This is simply asking for trouble. Chapter 736-Miserable Spark Jabba. I can only blame myself for eating devil fruits, but who else can I blame? However, this guy Spark Jabba is still quite miserable. Other people's devil fruits are just because they are not developed. His is better. Shouldn't it be the devil fruit that spy on other people's hearts? Li Ang's mouth moved slightly and asked tentatively. I guessed it right for you. So, in battle, other than knowing what the opponent thinks, it's basically useless. And these can be done by seeing, hearing, and domineering. Spark Jabba waved his hand helplessly and said bluntly. If it weren't for this devil fruit, he wouldn't have been distressed for more than 10 years. I would like to ask, were you weak before? Li Ang's eyes flashed and he asked. What's weak? Spark Jabba was puzzled and looked at Li Ang. Li Ang asked. It means that your strength before eating the devil fruit is very weak, isn't it? It's okay, at that time, it should not be weak. Spark Jabba understood what Li Ang meant and said with a wry smile, however, I didn't know satisfaction at the time, so I just ate a devil fruit I stole from someone else. At first, I was very happy. And now I just ate a devil fruit. Understand? This devil fruit is simply something that hurts people. When I grabbed it, the strange look in the opposite person's eyes is still hard to forget. Their eyes were like looking at a fool. I took away the devil fruit, and they didn't fight back, instead they ran away faster than me. At that time, I thought they were scared away by me when I was young and energetic. Quote. Down with these words. Leon also learned something about Spark Jabba. I have to admit that this guy's luck is really unlucky. Just eat a devil fruit, but the devil fruit finally affects him. Not only did his strength not improve, but instead he had a lot of weaknesses. Those who are afraid of seawater and sea towers, he has never cared about them in the past. It's a pity that I lost all of them for a devil fruit. At the beginning, I wanted to overcome the shortcomings of the landlubber. I was young and energetic, and I didn't even know the real meaning of the devil fruit. I also went to the sea to take a bath every day. It's so good, I almost drowned. Spark Jabba said with a hint of nostalgia. I saved you then. Kuroka's coughed dryly and said. Bullshit. Spark Jabba glanced at Kuroka's and said bluntly, you were not on the ship at that time. After you boarded the ship, I have already overcome the psychological barrier of devil fruit. Then you were still jumping into the sea in front of me. Kuroka said nothing without saying anything. Cough cough. Spark Jabba coughed, as if remembering some unbearable past events. His face flushed, and he didn't say anything else. Are there really useless devil fruits? Li Ang's eyes narrowed slightly, which surprised him. In the future, I have to be a little more cautious when choosing devil fruits for Wei Wei. It is hard to guarantee that there will be no weak devil fruits. Otherwise, as long as it is a natural system, it is generally not too weak to be terrible. So, what type of devil fruit is Jabba Sparks? Visually, it should be a superhuman type. Zoology is also unlikely. However, these Liang will not think too much. This rubbish devil fruit, no matter what it is, just need to know, it is useless. It's a pity. Chapter 736 _ Spark Jabba. It's a pity. Spark Jabba sighed, still brooding. More than 10 years later, he still can't forget this devil fruit in his body. Research is research, but what's the use? It's all tricks to spy on others' hearts. Could it be that in battle, he can still use these advantages to kill the enemy? Especially when the other party knows that he has this ability, it is difficult to guarantee that he will not use his inner thoughts to fool him, making him mistakenly think that the other party really knows his strategy. As everyone knows, the other party just took advantage of this, false and real, to disrupt the strategy in his heart. If you know that he has this ability, in battle, his ability will also become tasteless. Who can be sure that what people think is true? Wouldn't the other party deceive him in this way? Therefore, many times, he does not dare to easily believe the information obtained from his devil fruit. There were also several times when the enemy used his devil fruit to make him easily fooled. Thus, a diametrically opposite strategy was adopted, which caught him off guard. Question mark question mark question mark question mark question mark question mark question mark. The most serious one, he was almost beheaded on the spot. Even after that battle, he swore on the spot that he would never use the power of this devil fruit indiscriminately again, almost killing himself. It's miserable. Liang said with a calm expression and deep emotion. What if he got this devil fruit? Possibly, even the heart of death. This is simply not helpful at all, but instead adds one more landlubber's disadvantage. Originally, he didn't have any flaws at all, and he was the ultimate in every aspect. However, if the devil fruit is eaten, it is not necessarily. For people like him, devil fruit is not a help, but a burden. 0. Hearing Spark Jabba's words, he strengthened his faith even more. Never eat any devil fruit easily. No, not right. In this life, I don't need to eat any devil fruit. With his strength, does he still need to eat devil fruits to improve? This is obviously a joke. His strength is already at the top, there is no need to find a weakness for himself to let the enemy take advantage. So, I suggest you, it's better not to eat devil fruits indiscriminately. If you are not careful, if you are like me, there is no place for you to cry. Spark Jabba sighed again and said. I don't need to eat devil fruits. Liang smiled and said relaxedly. That's right. Spark Jabba nodded, without doubting what Liang said. With the opponent's top-notch strength, he still eats devil fruits. Isn't this frustrating? Eating devil fruits would be meaningless if it wasn't for strength. For example, it was him who ate a tasteless devil fruit and added another weakness to himself. Isn't this a calamity? But fortunately, over the years, he has almost become accustomed to having such shortcomings. It is also a fun thing to occasionally use the fruit ability to spy on the hearts of others. But if it is placed on the battlefield, he will definitely not use it. Relying on the tyrannical swordsmanship, he no longer needs to rely on the ability of the devil fruit. Not to mention, his devil fruit is still a tasteless devil fruit. Chapter 737 _ a fight. With the experience of being cheated several times, he dare not try to guess the inner thoughts of others. Who said the inner thoughts must be true? If he is not careful, he will be tricked directly. In terms of combat power, his ability is even more useless. Not only will it not help him, but it will allow the enemy to take advantage of it. It made him want to cry, but there was nowhere to cry. Devil fruit, kill people. Spark Jabba scratched his bald head in distress and shook his head. In the past 10 years, he has only gotten used to it a little bit. If it were the past, he would have to complain every day. No, how did the bald head come about? You have to be cautious when eating a devil fruit. Liang had a deep understanding and said. With your strength, you don't need it at all. Spark Jabba glanced at Liang and said bluntly. Liang's strength is naturally known by 003. The strength of the other party is terrifying to this point, and he still eats devil fruits. What is it that is not a waste of resources? If you don't eat it, you can suppress the Navy headquarters. Once you eat the devil fruit, you will be suppressed by the Navy headquarters in turn. One more landlubber weakness, which will allow a lot of people to plan some campaigns. Therefore, if Liang ate a devil fruit, it would be fine if the devil fruit was strong. If the devil fruit is weak, then there will be many people, and some plans will be launched. These plans are naturally aimed at Liang. Before there was no devil fruit, Liang's strength was at the top. After having devil fruit, this situation may not happen. I'm not that stupid yet. Liang nodded with a smile. Of course, he didn't think that his luck was so bad. Moreover, if he eats devil fruits, the system can definitely allow him to develop devil fruits to the extreme. Even the weakest devil fruit has been systematically developed. I'm afraid, it won't be weak. As long as it doesn't show up, Spark Jabba's extremely unlucky situation will naturally be fine. But who can be 100% sure about the type of devil fruit? Drink. Spark Jabba sighed and poured all the wine in the glass into his mouth at once. The appearance of drinking madly made Kuroka's beside him tremble, and his face became very ugly. He gritted his teeth and said solemnly, "You old man, you are here to lie to me about drinking. Is there anyone who drinks like this? You are drinking those high-concentration spirits on the street. This is my treasured wine, so wasted on you. Preserved fine wine. Then you shouldn't mind if I continue to taste it." Spark Jabba joked with a smile. "Go away." Kurokas glared at Spark Jabba angrily and shouted. "Was the wine you treasured so wasted?" He is very reluctant. The fine wine that he has collected for more than 10 years is killing him. Look at how stingy you are. Spark Jabba curled his lips and said, "Everyone has been an old man for decades, can't they still lack your drink? I think you are still as stubborn as before. Don't call me an iron cock." Cloakus shouted with fury on his face. "Who don't you call your iron rooster? Look at the colorful chicken feathers on your head. You're about to dress up as a rooster, and you won't be called by anyone." Spark Jabba said bluntly with a look of contempt. Liang showed a smile, and when he saw the appearance of Kukaros, he immediately thought of the comb of a chicken. "I see, didn't you say that you have no rivals in the world? Although you are old now, your tone is getting bigger and bigger. In front of you, you have the world's _1. Do you want to challenge it?" Kurokas rolled his eyes and said directly. Cough cough. Chapter 737 _ a fight. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. Cough cough. Spark Jabba almost spit out the drink in his mouth, glanced at Li Ang, swallowed his saliva, and said angrily, "Go yourself. Don't you claim to be invincible?" Kurokas looked at Spark Jabba with contempt and said. That was before. Spark Jabba blushed and perfunctory directly. But Kurokas obviously couldn't let it go, and spoke again. What is in front of you now is the opportunity to challenge the strongest man. It is even more difficult than challenging Whitebeard. I think you should not miss it. Right. This is the first in the world. Kurokas said with a smile. I really want to see the strength of Roger's left hand. I have seen the strength of Roger's right hand, so how strong is Roger's left hand? Li Ang was also interested and said. No, no need. Spark Jabba laughed dryly and said. Just kidding, you want to fight Li Ang. Is this looking for death? Of course he didn't want to make trouble for himself and find someone else to abuse him. Although his strength is still strong, at least not weaker than the general. However, if he meets Garp and the others, he will definitely lose, there is no doubt about that. And what kind of person is Li Ang in front of him? A terrifying monster that can shake Garp, Sengoku, and 2 generals, and still win in the end, hitting a general. After such a long time has passed, it is inevitable that the opponent will not have a situation where the strength will increase. Not to mention whether the strength has improved or not. If you look at Li Ang's previous strength, if he rushes up alone, it would be his own death. Is it possible that he can compete with Garp, Sengoku and the 2 generals? If he could do it, the captain's position would have already belonged to him. Moreover, if he has such fighting power, it is impossible for him to be unknown now. It is impossible for Whitebeard to be the strongest man in the world. This title has long been his. But he couldn't do it, and Li Ang in front of him did it. Challenge Li Ang. The idea flashed in his head, and he immediately denied it. Unless you want to die, you will challenge people who are so much stronger than yourself. Li Ang's strength no longer needs anyone to question. All kinds of feats basically determine Li Ang's influence on the sea. It can even control the Sea Kings. Old man, are you afraid? Kurokas smiled, and seeing the embarrassed appearance of the other party, he was directly happy in his heart. This old guy was finally fooled by Z1.6. As for whether the other party really wants to fight with Li Ang, he would not doubt the other's cowardice on this point. In this sea area, there are only a handful of people who dare to fight against Li Ang. There are only those 4 emperors who are arrogant. The rest of the staff, unless they didn't know Li Ang's reputation, would shy away. Not to mention Jabba Spark, even if Rayleigh saw Li Ang, he didn't dare to breathe heavily. Nothing. Spark Jabba muttered, his face hot. Just kidding, admit to being scared. This is definitely not possible. But it is impossible for him to really fight against Li Ang. Therefore, he can only go through the test to fool him. He will not admit that he is indeed a little scared in his heart. It's not that he's old, but that the gap in strength is too great. In such a battle, you don't need to fight to know the final result. Chapter 738-1 Trick. Just a trick, how about that? The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, looking at Spark Jabba and smiling. With one move, he can also know the realm of the opponent's strength. From this, it can be inferred that the strength of all members of the Roger Pirates was roughly divided. Cough cough. Kurokas also coughed dryly. Are you really going to fight? He just used it to bluff this fellow Spark Jabba. If he really wanted to fight, he wouldn't dare to look at that picture. Besides being abused, is there any other possibility for Spark Jabba? Could it be that he can still turn the world upside down? Li Ang's terrifying strength is obvious to all. Do you want to make a comeback? It also depends on whether Spark Jabba has the strength to shake Garp Sengoku plus 2 generals. If he can do it, he can fight against Li Ang. But he can't do such a feat, and even if he is besieged by these 4 people, he is afraid that he won't be able to hold on for a minute. One-on-one, it's fine, being beaten by a group is more than just stacking up combat power. If he fights in groups, his two fists will be hard to beat with four hands, and he will soon fall into a disadvantage. Four tyrannical people are besieging, and he has many aspects to observe. A person to be 27 defensively. Therefore, he expressed deep admiration for Li Ang's ability to shake the naval headquarters by himself. If it was him, it would have been a very impressive record for him to remain unbeaten. As for doing what Li Ang did, and suppressing the Navy headquarters, perhaps, in a dream, he could still do it. Don't, I'm afraid of hurting you, brother. Spark Jabba coughed, looked at Li Ang, and said involuntarily, "You old fellow." Kuroka's eyes widened, and he still expressed deep admiration for Spark Jabba's courage to kill. Under such circumstances, how dare you challenge Li Ang? Could it be that he thinks he has the strength to compete? Do not make jokes. He knew the opponent's strength very well. If he wanted Li Ang, he would only be able to defeat the opponent unless he could attack Li Ang with 10 people of the same strength. 5 words, still not enough. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Li Ang's eyes flashed, he smiled and said, I'm still a little worried, or don't fight. If it hurts you, it will affect our friendship a lot. This kind of thing is not good. Spark Jabba continued talking. Even Kurokas can't stand it anymore, old man, let's face it. Who is strong and who is weak, don't you have any points in your heart? Kukaros, who is familiar with the character of the old man, also understands that Spark Jabba is just trying to save face. For him to really rush into the battlefield, it must be something that was knocked over all at once. Not to mention that he is old, even at the peak of his youth, it is not enough for Li Ang. Li Ang's record is here, who dares to underestimate it? It doesn't matter, I just want to see your strength, and I don't have to decide whether to win or lose. Just one move is enough, what do you think? Li Ang shook his head and said bluntly. He just wanted to test the strength of Spark Jabba, and he was also curious about the strength level of the other party. It's not that you want to defeat the opponent, and it's not that you have to decide between life and death. If it was your life and death, he was afraid that Spark Jabba could be killed here in 3 seconds. Really going to fight? Spark Jabba asked tentatively with a bitter face. He doesn't want to fight against monsters like Li Ang. Although he believes that his strength is not weak, in front of monsters like Li Ang, his strength is like rushing to death. Even in the face of 2 generals, he did not think he would lose badly. But facing Li Ang in front of him, he didn't feel that he had any hope of victory. Only the feeling of failure shrouded in his heart. Chapter 738-1 Trick. Only the feeling of failure shrouded in his heart. After so many battles and life and death, he has long overcame his fear of the strong. Whenever he encounters someone stronger than himself, he can also summon the courage to fight and turn the tide of the battle. It's just that this is based on an enemy that is only a few points stronger than himself. And the Li Ang that I met in front of me was not so simple and powerful. How much stronger is the other party than him? The strength is more than 10 times his. It's just a trick, don't worry about it too much. Li Ang said slowly with a smile on his face. If that's the case, then I can only agree. But let's talk about it first, it's just a trick. If there's more, I'm afraid I'll hurt you, and it won't be good. Spark Jabba said without blushing at all. You old man, your skin is thicker than the city wall. Kurokas was a little embarrassed and said bluntly. What, I'm giving young people a chance, do you understand? Spark Jabba glanced at Kurokas and said angrily. Understood. Kurokas nodded, thought for a moment, looked at Li Ang, and said in a low voice, Mr. Li Ang, I think, you don't need to keep your hands. He is afraid of hurting you, and you should go all out to deal with it. ITM. Spark Jabba coughed directly and almost suffered internal injuries. This Kurokas is going to kill himself on the battlefield. If Li Ang makes a full effort, it is a question whether he can survive or not. And the other side. Kuroka's looked at Spark Jabba with interest, his eyes became more and more weird. As if to say, look, this is the price of being tough. Humph. Spark Jabba snorted coldly, took a deep breath, and withdrew his gaze. He looked at Liang with a solemn expression, daring not to be careless, and asked, "Are you here?" "It doesn't matter, I just want to test it out, not to really fight a battle." Liang's mouth moved slightly and smiled. "Then here it is." Spark Jabba snorted and glanced at Kuroka's angrily, with a 123-point expression on his face. If he was here, even if he smashed the cave, it would have nothing to do with him. Who made this old guy also instigate the other party to fight with him? Since the thing is done by oneself, then no matter how helpless it is, the result has to be swallowed. This time, even Kuroka's face became a little bitter, and he was very helpless. He wanted the two to go out to fight, but he was too embarrassed to speak. A long time. He could only sigh and look forward to the end of this fight, so don't let it go. If there are no grottos, then he will cry without tears. There are many things here, but they are all preserved and treasured by him. If it is destroyed, then he will at least hold a grudge for 3 years and scold this fellow Spark Jabba. As for why he didn't hate Liang. Of course, I can't afford it. Everyone suffers together. Spark Jabba thought so in his heart, and when he saw Kuroka's bitter face, his mood was instantly relieved. Want to pit yourself? In that case, don't think about it for everyone. It was in this mood that he proposed to fight in a grotto instead of going out. In fact, it is more convenient to go out. But considering that it's just a trick, it doesn't have to be so troublesome. If it was a grotto that was destroyed, he also looked at the ugly face of the little old man Kuroka's. Chapter 739-Absolute Suppression. Kuroka's, what do you think? Jabba Spark was still smiling, provoking Kuroka's. The best thing is to destroy the grotto and see how the little old man dares to be so arrogant in front of him. Humph. Kukaros snorted, did not speak, his face was very ugly. Seeing the ugly face of the other party, Spark Jabba was even more excited. This old man was actually trapped in a pothole by himself. Really comfortable. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his mood relaxed. Let's get started. Liang didn't care about the game between the two old people and said bluntly. These two old guys are naturally too familiar with each other, so they will continue to design pits against each other. This is also a testimony to the strong friendship. Although it seems unreliable on the surface, when the other party is in trouble, both of them will definitely stand up for each other. It is normal for such a person to have bumps on weekdays. So soon? Spark Jabba said with a tight expression. You can prepare, it's just a move, and it's not about fighting to the end. So, there's no need to be so nervous. Liang kept a smile and said slowly. Ahem, I'm just afraid that I'll hurt you, so I need you to prepare. Jabba Sparks continued, if it's me, I'm ready. One move, it's me attacking or you attacking. After speaking, he was a little nervous. If Liang attacked, he might not be able to stop it. Although it is only one move, if it is too terrifying, he will die on the spot. This is the opponent's terrifying strength, the deterrent effect on him. Come on. Liang said without thinking. He just wanted to test the opponent's strength, not to defeat the opponent. This still needs to be clarified. If you want to defeat the opponent, you don't need to be so troublesome, and doing it directly is the easiest and most direct way. He didn't pay much attention to what Spark Jabba said. For the elderly, you have to give each other a bit of thin noodles. Otherwise, how can you look so big? Liang admits that he is still an excellent young man who respects the old and loves the young, and is considerate to the elderly. It is not impossible for the elderly to brag about it. Am I coming? Exactly. Spark Jabba blinked and nodded. If you let him attack, he won't have much trouble. Just need to consider, what is the best chance to use it? Once the power is too terrifying, it will really destroy the grotto completely. Even if it's just the aftermath, it will shake this place into ruins. Go all out. Liang seemed to see through Spark Jabba's concerns and said, if you're worried about the aftermath, you don't have to. Although my strength is not strong, if I block the aftermath, I'm still able to do it with ease. I hope, Mr. Liang, that you can let the aftermath destroy this place and make this old guy homeless. In this way, I will feel at ease. Spark Jabba's worries disappeared all of a sudden, and laughed. You bastard. Kukaros glared at Spark Jabba angrily and said. He glanced at Liang, a little suspicious in his heart. Both of them were shocked by Liang's words. Can the aftermath be blocked? What kind of terrifying strength is this? When faced with an attack, it can still prevent the leakage of the aftermath. At least, it was the first time the two of them had heard of it, and it was the first time they had met such a person. Old guy, do you want to go out and avoid it? For a weak chicken like you, I'm afraid that a gust of wind will knock you down later. It's really shameful for an old person to be knocked down by the wind and half dead. Spark Jabba glanced at Kurokas and said. Chapter 739-Absolute Suppression. Spark Jabba glanced at Kurokas and said. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Liang said with a smile and a confident tone. If the enemy is only a person like Jabba Spark who is comparable to the strength of a general, he will not worry about the leakage of the aftermath. With the opponent's strength, even if he burst out with all his strength, he could block it with one hand. The other hand can directly disperse the aftermath. Really or not? Spark Jabba said suspiciously. He didn't doubt Liang's strength, but if he wanted to block his attack, he would use another force to prevent the aftermath from leaking. This is to do two things with one mind, and also, let the power be dispersed. Can the other party really do it easily? Get ready to start. Liang nodded, without any tension. At the same time, a terrifying aura spread over him, instantly restrained. So strong. Spark Jabba and Kurokas looked at each other with a solemn expression. Although it was only for a moment, they were keenly aware of it. That momentum is absolutely powerful to the point of boundless. They have never felt such majestic power in others. Especially Spark Jabba, he has lived for most of his life, and he has experienced countless battles, and he has never experienced the feeling of being shrouded in such a huge momentum. This momentum is definitely more than 10 times stronger than his. Then I'll do it. With a dignified expression on Jabba's face, he took out a sharp knife with a purple blade. There were many lines on the blade, which looked very mysterious and mysterious. What can't be concealed is that this knife contains amazing blood. It is conceivable that there are definitely many people killed by this knife. But compared with Liang's first-generation ghost Toru, it's still too far behind. Liang slowly pulled out the first-generation ghost, the bright red and demonic blade, and showed it in the eyes of Spark Jabba and Kurokas, making them look sluggish and unable to speak. This knife is so evil. Buzz. Shocking murderous aura enveloped the audience. Spark Jabba faced this shocking murderous aura head-on, and even the willpower in his head was constantly weakening under the interference of this murderous aura. Just pulling out a blade, it was the feeling of being invincible by Spark Jabba. Diaresis, the knife, trembling. The hilt of the knife that Spark Jabba held in both hands was shaking. It's not that his hands are shaking, but his knife is shaking. What is happening? He was completely shocked. Was he even shocked by the knife? This is not a simple thing. This knife is so scary. He looked at the first-generation Gush in Liang's hand, and said with a very heavy expression. The strength of this knife exceeded his expectations. In the past, it's not that he, Wang Wanghao, has not seen the first generation of ghosts, but it is the first time he has seen such a tyrannical first-generation ghosts. The first-generation Onito that I had seen before was not as strong as it is now. Not even 1/10 of the current strength. Is this the real first-generation ghost? Only this man can show such tyrannical power. These two are a perfect match. Spark Jabba took a deep breath, thinking so. An extremely tyrannical demon sword, an extremely powerful user. Both are top-of-the-line existences. So the two go together. I am afraid that there is really no rival in this world. Even the blade is suppressed by the opponent's blade. What else can Spark Jabba say? Before starting the battle, his own weapons retreated, something he never dared to imagine before. But at this moment, it happened abruptly in front of his eyes, in his own experience, so he had to believe it. It turns out that weapons are also afraid of time. Chapter 740 The gap is too big. Old ghost, your hands are shaking, shouldn't you be afraid? Kurokas narrowed his eyes slightly and said slowly. Go away. Spark Jabba shouted angrily, is this his own hand shaking? Although it can be understood in this way, the reason for the trembling is not his hand, but the knife in his hand, which is constantly trembling under the deterrence of the first-generation ghost. Therefore, even his hands were shaking. A terrifying murderous aura enveloped the whole body. Feeling this murderous aura, Spark Jabba's face became more and more solemn. Murderous intent could not defeat his belief. However, this murderous aura made his heart heavy. This isn't Li Ang's murderous aura, it's just the murderous aura emanating from the demon sword of the first-generation Goosh. A single weapon brought him such terrifying pressure. How terrifying would it be if the person holding the weapon burst into imposing manner? This moment. An idea was more confirmed in his mind. Sure enough, Li Ang deserves to be Li Ang, and his reputation is well deserved. Are you ready? The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly. He held the first-generation Gito, and his body was also surrounded by the murderous aura of the first-generation Gito, as if he was a killing god who came out of hell, and the murderous aura was like reality. This murderous intent is only aimed at Spark Jabba. Even so, Kurokas, who was standing beside him, still had a tingling scalp, and couldn't help but retreated several 613 steps, completely staying away from the surrounding area of the two. If he doesn't leave quickly, he won't be able to leave after a while. This murderous aura is terrifying. He looked suspiciously at Spark Jabba. Is this old ghost really afraid? Why, the hands are shaking so badly. Don't worry, I hope that my cave will not be demolished. It took a lot of my strength to make it. Cloakus gritted his teeth, thinking so, completely staying away from the surroundings of the two of them. He spent a lot of money to create this cave. In addition, there are also many precious items hidden here, all of which he put here. Once the cave collapses, all these things will naturally be destroyed. Thinking of this, he felt depressed for a while. If I had known it earlier, I would not have lured the two to fight. In the end, it seems that he is the one who suffers. So strong. Spark Jabba looked at Li Ang solemnly, holding the handle of the knife in both hands, daring not to be careless. Naturally, the ability of the devil fruit did not dare to be displayed in front of Li Ang. In the face of such a terrifying powerhouse, his tasteless devil fruit is useless at all. Let's start. Let me see Chi, the legendary strength of Roger's left hand. Li Ang's face was calm, and he didn't feel nervous at all. He was holding the first generation of ghosts, and he didn't even bless the blood holy outfit, so he was calm. It's just Spark Jabba. In front of him, such an enemy is not an enemy that truly threatens him. Just want to see the strength of the other party, that's all. Otherwise, as soon as he makes a move, it is unknown whether the other party can block it. Good. Spark Jabba did not dare to be careless and nodded solemnly. He forcibly controlled the blades of both hands to stabilize the blades. If he continued to tremble, it was unknown whether he could attack. This is a situation he absolutely cannot tolerate. Can't even attack, this face is really lost. It can be defeated, but it must not be accepted before the battle. There is no doubt about defeat, he never thought of defeating Li Ang. However, if you admit it, that's the real shame. In particular, there is the little old man Krokas watching here. If he admits to counseling, maybe this guy will laugh at him for the rest of his life. Chapter 740 The gap is too big. In particular, there is the little old man Croca's watching here. If he admits to counseling, maybe this guy will laugh at him for the rest of his life. Thinking of this, his mood was firm, looking at Li Ang in front of him, urging the attack. A terrifying aura emerges spontaneously. Armed domineering pervades the blade, sturdy and stubborn like black jade, flawless. It can also vaguely reflect some sunlight, and it looks hard beyond people's imagination. With the blessing of armed color, Spark Jabba slightly increased his self-confidence, took a deep breath, and shouted, "Yi Dao Lu Dragon Slash." Call out. A sharp slash pierced the air. The speed was extremely fast, and in an instant, he arrived in front of Li Ang. The terrifying aura made Kuroka's, not far away, feel a little desperate. The cave, or else it's safe. This damn old ghost actually really wants to destroy the cave. This slash, obviously, the other party used all his strength. This old ghost, can't you spare some strength? Cloacus gritted his teeth, thinking so. Immediately, his eyes were fixed on Li Ang's body, expecting that the other party would be able to completely block this slashing attack intact. If possible, then of course everything is for the best. The cave will not be destroyed, which is the best situation for everyone. Nice attack. Li Ang was expressionless, with a smile, holding the first-generation ghost, and swiped past. Call out. A sharp slash flew away and collided with Spark Jabba's slash. Bright and dazzling light, touching each other. Boom. A terrifying sound caused the ground to tremble, as if it was about to pierce a person's ear. The sound was very loud and reverberated around. The entire cave trembled, which made Kuroka's panic. A lot of dust fell from the top of his head, staining his entire shoulder. After Li Ang chopped off the knife, he waved his left hand, and a terrifying force erupted again, shrouding the attack in front and confining all the aftermath of the attack within it. Therefore, there are no traces around them. The confrontation of these two terrifying attacks did not bring much aftermath here. Vibration was inevitable, but it didn't bring any damage. Scary. Spark Jabba's eyes narrowed, and after seeing Li Ang directly imprisoning his power in a certain area, his face involuntarily changed dramatically. Not only did it stop his attack, but it also blocked the aftermath. Such an ability can no longer be described as a human being. This guy is really a monster. Spark Jabba's lips moved slightly, and his mood became heavier. If Li Ang was the enemy, he would really be killed in an instant. His full blow was blocked by Li Ang with a single knife, and even the aftermath was imprisoned, and no aftermath was revealed. How can people who can do these things be ordinary people? Li Ang, he is too strong. The smoke gradually dissipated. Li Ang also gradually loosened the shackles of power, and everything returned to the tranquility of the past. There were no potholes on the ground, and the surrounding walls were not pierced. Not far away, Kuroka's breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, as Li Ang said, the aftermath of this terrifying attack was directly imprisoned. This made him speechless. What kind of tyrannical power does it take to do this? Visible. The old ghost Spark Jabba was completely suppressed by Li Ang. The strength gap between the two is too far away, and they are not on the same level at all.